Have you ever looked out a window and felt like you were seeing something you shouldn't? What if that window showed you a world from the past, a world filled with shadows and secrets? This is the story of my new apartment, where my bedroom window didn't just look out at the street. It looked into another time. When I first moved in, I was excited. The walls were freshly painted, and the floors creaked just enough to give the place character. But as night fell, I noticed something strange. The moonlight cast odd shapes on my walls, and the air felt heavy, like something was watching me. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I brushed it off. I was just getting used to my new home. But then I looked out my window. That's when everything changed. I saw a different world, one that was dark and twisted, filled with whispers and shadows. I could see people dressed in old-fashioned clothes, their faces twisted in fear and sadness. They didn't know I was there, but I could see them clearly. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was trapped, my eyes glued to the window, as if it had some kind of magic. As I watched, I saw a woman standing in the street below. She looked lost, her eyes wide with terror. Suddenly, she turned and looked right at me. My heart raced. How could she see me? I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. The crash echoed in my empty apartment, but the woman didn't flinch. She kept staring, her face a mask of horror. I wanted to scream, to run away, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I leaned closer to the window, and that's when I saw it, a shadow moving behind her. It was dark and shapeless, creeping toward her like a predator. I wanted to warn her, to shout, but no sound came out. I was just a spectator in this nightmare. The shadow reached her, and she gasped, her mouth opening wide in a silent scream. I felt a cold wave wash over me as I realized that whatever was happening was not just a figment of my imagination. I was witnessing something real, something terrible. I could feel the fear radiating from her, and it wrapped around me like a thick fog. Then, just like that, the scene changed. The woman vanished, and the street was empty again. I blinked, trying to shake off the fear, but I couldn't. I pulled the curtains shut, hoping to block out whatever dark magic was at play. But the images lingered in my mind, haunting me. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to ignore the window. But I couldn't resist the urge to look again. Each time, I saw different scenes, people arguing, a child crying, and shadows moving in the corners of my vision. It was like a movie playing out before my eyes, but it was a horror movie filled with pain and despair. One night, I gathered my courage and decided to confront whatever was happening. I opened the window wide, feeling the cold night air rush in. "What do you want?" I shouted into the darkness. There was no answer, just the sound of the wind swirling around me, taunting me. But then, I heard a voice, soft and whispery, like a breeze brushing past my ear. "Help us," it said. My heart raced. Who was I supposed to help? What did they need? I felt a pull, a connection to these people trapped in their time, and I knew I had to find out more. I began to research the history of my building, digging through old newspapers and records. What I found was chilling. Years ago, a terrible crime had taken place in my apartment. A family had lived there, and one night, they disappeared without a trace. The police never found them, and the case went cold. As I read the stories, I felt the weight of their sadness pressing down on me. I could see their faces in my mind, the fear and confusion that must have filled their last moments. I realized that the people I saw were not just ghosts. They were trapped souls caught between this world and the next. They needed someone to remember them, to tell their story. With each passing night, the visions grew stronger. I saw the family again, their faces twisted in fear, their eyes pleading for help. I felt their pain like a heavy blanket, suffocating me. I knew I had to do something, but what could I do? I was just one person, alone in a strange apartment. One night, as I stood at the window, I saw the woman again. This time, she was not alone. A group of people surrounded her, all looking lost and afraid. I could feel their desperation, and it wrapped around me like a vice. "Please," they whispered, their voices blending into a haunting chorus. "Help us find peace." I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to act. I began to speak to them, sharing their story with anyone who would listen. I wrote letters, posted on social media, and even talked to my neighbors. I wanted to make sure they were not forgotten. As I shared their story, something began to change. The shadows in my apartment grew lighter, and the whispers started to fade. I could feel the weight of their sadness lifting, and for the first time, I felt hope. Maybe I could help them find peace. Maybe I could free them from their torment. But just when I thought I was making progress, the visions became darker. I saw the family again, but this time, they were angry. Their faces twisted in rage. They pointed at me, accusing me of failing them. I stumbled back, fear gripping my heart. "I'm trying," I shouted, but they didn't listen. The shadows closed in around me, and I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder. "Help us," they cried, their voices echoing in my mind. I was drowning in their despair, unable to breathe. I realized that I was in over my head, and I didn't know how to save them. My heart raced as I struggled against the darkness, feeling it pull me under. I knew I had to find a way to break the cycle, to help them find peace once and for all. But how? I thought back to the stories I had read, the history of my building. There had to be something, some clue that would lead me to the truth. I spent days searching, poring over old records and speaking to anyone who would listen. Finally, I stumbled upon a forgotten diary in the library, belonging to one of the family members. As I read through the pages, I felt a chill run down my spine. The entries were filled with fear, detailing strange noises and shadows that moved in the night. It was as if they knew something was coming for them. I knew I had to return to my apartment, to confront whatever darkness lingered there. I gathered my courage and stood before the window once more, ready to face the truth. "I'm here," I shouted into the night. "I won't let you suffer alone." As I spoke, the shadows began to swirl around me, growing thicker and darker. I could feel the presence of the family, their fear wrapping around me like a shroud. "Help us," they cried, their voices merging into a haunting melody. I closed my eyes, focusing on their pain, their sorrow. Suddenly, I felt a rush of energy, a warmth spreading through me. I opened my eyes and saw the shadows begin to dissipate, their forms becoming clearer. I could see their faces, twisted in agony, but now there was a glimmer of hope in their eyes. They were listening. "Tell me what you need," I urged, my heart racing. "I want to help you." In that moment, I felt a connection deeper than I had ever experienced. I could feel their pain, their fear, but also their love for one another. They needed to be remembered, to have their story told. I knew what I had to do. I began to speak their names one by one, sharing their story with the world. I promised them I would not let them be forgotten, that I would continue to fight for their peace. As I spoke, the shadows began to fade, replaced by a soft light that filled the room. I could feel their gratitude washing over me, a wave of warmth that chased away the darkness. The air grew lighter, and I knew I was making progress. But just as I felt the first glimmers of hope, a chilling wind swept through the room, extinguishing the light. I turned, and there it was, the dark figure that had haunted my dreams, looming in the corner of the room. It was massive and shapeless, its eyes glowing with malice. I felt a wave of terror wash over me, but I stood my ground. "You will not take them," I shouted, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. The figure lunged, but I was ready. I reached deep within myself, calling on the love and strength of the family I had come to know. "You are not alone," I cried, and in that moment, the light returned, brighter than ever before. The shadows shrieked, their cries echoing in the night as the figure began to dissolve. With a final scream, the darkness was gone, replaced by a warm glow that filled the room. I could feel the presence of the family surrounding me, their love wrapping around me like a blanket. I had done it. I had helped them find peace. But even as I felt their warmth, I knew that the story was not over. There were still whispers in the night, shadows lurking just beyond the edges of my vision. I had opened a door, and while I had helped one family, I could feel that many more were waiting, trapped in their own stories, longing for someone to hear them. I took a deep breath, looking out at the night sky. I knew I had a choice to make. I could close the window, forget the darkness, and live my life in peace. Or I could keep it open, embrace the unknown, and continue to help those who needed it most. As I stood there, I felt a sense of purpose swell within me. I could not turn away from the pain of others. I would keep the window open, ready to face whatever came next. I would be their voice, their light in the darkness. And so, I waited, watching the night unfold before me, knowing that the stories would continue. The window that saw would always be there, a portal to the past, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope could shine through. I stood in front of the open window, my heart racing as I prepared for whatever haunted presence might come next. The night was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the distant echo of voices drifting from the shadows. I could feel their pain like a cold breath against my skin, chilling me to the bone. I knew I had to summon the courage to confront whatever darkness was lurking there, just beyond the reach of the light. As I focused on the window, a dense fog began to creep in from the street below. It curled and writhed like a living thing, wrapping around my feet and rising higher, coating my ankles. The air turned frigid, and goosebumps prickled my skin. I took a step back, but the heavy mist had a weight to it, pulling me closer to the glass like a predator waiting to pounce. Suddenly, distorted faces emerged from the fog, frozen in expressions of fear and heartbreak. I squinted, trying to make out the faces clearly, but they remained just out of reach, their mouths moving, whispering secrets I could not hear. I leaned in, compelled by the need to understand, and as I did, the whispers grew louder. They were calling for help, their words tangled in desperation and sorrow. "Help us," a voice echoed, clearer this time, emerging from the mist like a faded memory. "Please!" My breath hitched in my throat. I recognized that pleading tone. It was the same voice I had heard before, the woman from the street. I strained to see her, but she was cloaked within a whirlpool of shadows. Just as I felt I might grasp onto something solid, the mist surged towards me, filling my lungs with a biting cold. I gasped, stumbling backward, heart pounding as the air became heavier and darker. I turned away from the window, feeling the urge to escape this waking nightmare, but something urged me to stay. I sensed a presence, something coiling around me. It was a mixture of anger and a desperate need to be seen. I could see the faces in the mist more clearly now, a swirling mix of unknown lives overspilling in this strange limbo. I felt their cold fear wrapping around me like icy fingers, squeezing tighter as I glanced back. "Don't leave us," came a chorus of frantic pleas, echoing through my room. I felt the light flicker above me, and in that moment of darkness, my mind flashed with images from the past. An old child's toy lying forgotten on the floor, a cracked photograph of a smiling family hanging crookedly on a wall. Then, the memories turned gruesome. I saw the family's last moments, their faces twisted in terror, shadows clawing at their feet as they began to vanish into thin air. I wanted to scream, to flee, but I also wanted closure for them, a way to help their lost souls find peace. I leaned against the wall, feeling the cool plaster beneath my fingertips as the figures in the window pressed closer, their hands reaching out. "Do you remember me?" I asked, the words slipping from my lips almost without thought. Their eyes were locked on me with urgent desperation, and I took a shaky step forward. With each new breath, the shadowy figures drew nearer, their mouths moving in a synchronized rhythm, as if they were reciting something sacred, their lost memories woven together in a terrifying symphony of despair. I could hear myself say, "I'm listening," and something shifted in the atmosphere, like the air itself was holding its breath. The window began to warp and twist, transforming into a swirling portal that pulled at my vision. I stumbled closer, captivated by the urgency emanating from the mist. It hovered almost playfully, drawing me into its embrace. Suddenly, I felt a pull in my chest, like an unseen string had tethered my heart to this tragic scene. "What do you want me to know?" I cried, feeling the warmth drain from my body as they all turned toward me. In that moment, the fog cleared just a fraction, and I saw the remnants of the house that once stood where my apartment was now. It was alive with color, people moving about their daily lives, unaware of the fate that awaited them. I saw the woman, but she was not alone. A child held onto her skirt, and a man stood protectively at their side. I recognized the sinister aura that filled the air, as shadows coiled around their feet like hungry serpents, waiting to strike. "Help us escape," the mother's voice echoed through the fading images, her eyes pleading as she reached toward me. The shadows danced in the background, whispering their secrets, drawing me deeper into the history of the crime that had sentenced them to this nightmare. I realized then, to my horror, that I was witnessing the night of their invasion, the night they were taken. "No!" I screamed suddenly, grasping the window frame. "You can't keep reliving this." But the more I shouted, the more intense the collective energy became. It surged within my chest, shaping into a storm of panic and rage as the family's horror washed over me, flooding my senses until I felt dizzy with fear. The shadow figures manifested behind the family, dark and looming, filling the air with despair as they reached out with invisible hands, dragging them into the depths of the darkness. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the screams that filled my mind. The cries of an innocent child, the desperation of the mother, and the stoic resolve of the father, who fought futilely against the encroaching horror. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a deep breath of icy realization that perhaps I was bound to the very horror I wished to escape. The shadows turned cruel, their forms morphing into grotesque shapes. The man suddenly lurched, his eyes wide with terror as he faced the maw of the creature that had come for them. The child screamed, a sound so full of despair that it pierced the abyss of darkness surrounding me, sending shivers down my spine. I couldn't take it any longer. I ripped my gaze from the scene and stumbled back, crashing against the wall of my apartment, breathless and shaking. "I won't let this happen. I won't get dragged into this," I shouted into the abyss, clenching my fists in desperation. And then something extraordinary happened. The air around me began to shimmer, and a low, oppressive hum filled the room, so deep I felt it in my bones. The whispers peaked into a haunting crescendo, growing louder and more chaotic, until everything turned white and silent. In that blankness, I sensed their presence still hovering, multitudes of souls reaching out, tugging at the edges of my sanity. I gasped for breath as shadows raged, battling against the ethereal light that engulfed me. "Stop!" I cried, and just like that, the world around me ruptured and shattered. I found myself standing alone in my room once more, breathless and trembling. The window slammed shut, sealing off the darkness that had engulfed me only moments before. My heart was racing, and I leaned against the wall, feeling both the fear and the energy draining from me. I knew I had touched something terrifying, a raw, pulsating truth that wanted out. Yet I also sensed something else, a lingering presence like a breath on my neck and a whisper in my ear. "You are chosen," it seemed to say, sending alarm bells ringing in my mind. As I stood there, reality twisted and warped, reminding me of the thin line that separated this world from the one I saw beyond the glass. It would not let me go. I could feel it in every shadow that flickered just beyond reach. I backed away from the window cautiously, but a sudden pounding on the other side jerked me back to attention. The sound echoed louder, as if someone or something was desperate to break through. Panic surged within me. I felt trapped in a nightmare, unable to decide whether to run away or answer the call. The pounding continued, reverberating through the very walls of my apartment, and then it grew quieter, turning into a soft tapping. It sounded almost like fingers gently pleading. Every part of me screamed to flee, but curiosity rooted me in place. My heart drummed in synchronization with the tapping, and I found myself inching closer to the window, a strange compulsion guiding my movements. When my fingers brushed against the glass, it was icy cold, and I shivered as an electric feeling coursed through me. The world outside was dark, save for a sliver of moonlight illuminating a figure standing just beyond the fog. Dread pooled in my stomach as the figure turned to face me, revealing a skeletally thin woman in tattered clothes. Her skin was pale, almost ghostly translucent, and her eyes burned like coals in the darkness. I felt my breath hitch in my throat as my instinct screamed at me to step back, but I was frozen, unable to look away. The woman raised a hand, gesturing for me to come closer. "Help us," she mouthed silently, her lips moving with an ethereal grace. But it was not the plea that made me falter. It was the sound of creaking wood behind me, like something was crossing my threshold. I turned quickly, praying that my imagination was playing tricks on me. But as I did, I felt a cold breeze swirl around me, rustling the papers on my desk. Wheeling back to the window, I found the specter had vanished, leaving only the darkness that stretched out into the night. My heart raced even faster as I felt my body turn towards the approaching sound again. The air grew thick with tension, and I was acutely aware that I was no longer alone. The tapping increased, more insistent. It was as if something was clawing at the door behind me, longing to get inside. I caught sight of shadows flitting past my periphery, whispering distorted words I could not comprehend. They were all around me now, the lost spirits trapped in between worlds. I could feel the weight of their anguish pressing down, and I was suffocating under the burden. Suddenly, the door swung open without warning, revealing a pitch-black void beyond. I stumbled backward, tripping over myself as I gasped in terror. What stood before me was not a friendly face or a ghost seeking solace. It was a portal of unimaginable darkness, pulsating with energy that felt almost alive. I could feel its tendrils stretching toward me, eager to ensnare my very essence. I turned, desperate to escape, yet the window no longer felt like a safe place. As I moved further back, a strange voice echoed in my mind. "Join us," it whispered, hypnotic and low. It promised relief from the fear, but also danger beyond comprehension. The walls felt like they were closing in, the shadows lengthening, and I shivered with the weight of the promise they made. I felt the pull of the darkness. It wanted me to surrender, to give in to the fear, but something deep inside me fought back. I would not let the shadows have me. "No!" I cried out, pushing against the fear that coiled around my heart. I would fight. I would shine a light in this abyss that threatened to swallow me whole. With an instinct born from my fight for survival, I turned in defiance, sprinting for the window that had first opened this terrifying chapter of my life. My hands gripped the sill tightly. I felt warmth as I pulled back the heavy curtain, exposure flooding my senses with relief. As daylight spilled into the room, the air shifted, my fear transforming into a fierce resolve. But the whispers did not silence. Instead, they grew louder, crescendoing into a chaotic chorus of longing and despair. I caught glimpses of the woman, the child, forever intertwined with the past, forever calling for help. And as the light poured in, I knew I had two choices now. I could close the window forever, choosing the warmth of sunlight over the dark tales that haunted me, or I could brave the shadows, knowing that each story deserved to be heard, even if it meant facing my greatest fears. And as I stood there, heart racing and hands trembling, I realized I could not abandon them again. In the face of all that darkness, I made my decision. I would fight to unearth the secrets held in this haunted abode. The shadows in the window would no longer control me. I felt the weight of their history pressing down on me, and I knew this battle was not just for me. I was connected to their suffering, and it was now my mission to help them find peace or perish in the attempt. As I stepped closer to the window, prepared to confront my destiny, the air thickened and the shadows shrieked. I could almost feel their cold breath curling around me, coaxing me to retreat, to abandon this fight. But I was determined. I had opened this door, and now it was time to step through. The moment I laid my hands on the window pane, a jolt of energy surged through me, almost overwhelming. I felt their despair wrapping around me like chains, each link representing a haunting memory trapped within these walls. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to focus on the flickering lights of the past dancing just beyond the glass. The dim glow began to pulse, illuminating the faces of those lost souls once more. Suddenly, the air shifted. The tiny beams of light began to coalesce into shapes, figures, familiar yet distant, swirling with the fog. They emerged slowly, taking form in the blinding brightness. I could see their features more clearly now, the chilling expressions of hunger and pain etched on their faces. Their mouths moved, forming silent pleas, and I could sense their story begging for release. "Help us," they all echoed together, their voices merging into one haunting melody that sent shivers through my spine. It was a sound drenched in sorrow, each word striking a chord deep within my heart. I felt my resolve beginning to waver, the weight of their grief pulling me toward them, but I stood firm. I wouldn't turn back. Then, from within the thrumming shadows, something darker began to emerge. A figure grew from the depths of the fog, towering and menacing, its features obscured yet ghostly pale. I felt a chill run down my spine as I staggered back, instinctively holding my breath. The shape stretched upward, its arms flaring like tendrils made of pure dark, reaching out toward me with a claw-like grasp that could snatch my very soul. "Stay away!" I shouted, my voice shaky but urgent, echoing in the still room. I could feel the energy shift like a storm brewing just out of sight. The figures of the family froze, their expressions abruptly shifting from despair to horror. The looming creature moved closer, its presence like a black hole that threatened to swallow everything in its path. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread gnawing at my insides, urging me to flee, yet I knew I couldn't abandon the family. They needed me. I took a step forward, a fiery determination fueling my steps. "What do you want? Why are you trapped here?" My words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their sorrow. For a moment, there was silence. Even the shadows stilled, as if waiting for an answer. The figures began to subtly fade, their forms flickering in and out of existence like dying embers. "Tell her," a voice whispered from the darkness, echoing with an unnatural resonance. "Show her what has been lost." Before I could comprehend the meaning of those words, I was tugged toward the nightmarish figure. I felt the icy tendrils wrapping around my limbs, but instead of resisting, I closed my eyes. Images flashed behind my eyelids, manifestations of their history bursting forth like fireworks against a starless sky. My surroundings shifted dramatically. Suddenly, I was standing in what looked like an old living room, centuries old and decayed. Dust particles sparkled in the remnants of light, filtering through cracked and broken windows. The furniture had faded but still bore the weight of years long gone. I was a ghost in another time, witnessing the last moments of the family, the laughter and love once shared now swallowed by shadows. The mother, vibrant and warm, called out to the little girl, her voice melodic yet strained. I felt a pang of sorrow twist inside me as I watched the child run through the room, her laughter echoing like a fading memory. Then, without warning, the atmosphere shifted. A heavy door creaked open, and in stepped a group cloaked in darkness, their presence oppressive and suffocating. They moved like phantoms, creeping closer with malice evident in their haunting eyes. I could feel the imminent dread rising. The calm shattered as fear spread like poison in the air. "Run! Get out!" the mother cried, desperation coloring her voice as she threw her arms around her daughter, instinctively shielding her from the encroaching dread. But their efforts were futile. The shadows lunged forward like a pack of ravenous wolves, the edge of their darkness devouring the warmth of the room, pulling the light into their trenches. I watched helplessly as chaos erupted. The mother screamed, and shadows engulfed her, dragging her down with unnatural speed. The father charged forward, fists clenched, but his efforts barely reached the monstrous figures. He fought with everything he had, but it was like punching smoke. The darkness coiled around him, a living mass that devoured hope and light. The moment felt stretched, as though time itself was suffocating under the weight of despair. I could feel the child's pulse quickening, could sense her fright as she was snatched from her mother's grip, the shadows taking her away. "No, please," I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the cacophony of terror that filled the air. Just as everything plunged into darkness, I was jerked back, pulled from the horrifying visions, collapsing into my apartment. My heart thundered in my chest, the echoes of their screams reverberating in my ears. The air was thick with grief, and I gasped, desperate for breath as reality rushed back like a tidal wave. I was back at the window, but now the shadows were shifting with a renewed ferocity, swirling like a tempest. They lashed out, a cacophony of silence trying to break free, each anguished face belting cries for freedom. The dark figure loomed closer, its form now almost solid, hovering at the edge of my reality. I felt the shackles of fear trying to bind me again, but I gritted my teeth, shaking my head violently. "No, I won't let you take them." The words burst from my lips, infused with a surge of defiance that surprised even me. The energy shifted suddenly, the very air crackling with tension as though the universe itself paused to listen. The shadows hesitated, momentarily stilled by the rawness of resolve spilling from my heart. I could feel the family's grief intertwining with my strength, a bond forged in desperation and hope. "You deserve peace," I shouted into the rumbling darkness, my voice firm and unwavering. With each word, the shadows flickered, their forms trembling as they responded to my declaration. I reached into my chest and pulled out all the courage I had, visualizing a light radiating from within, pushing back against the encroaching gloom. "I won't abandon you. You will be set free." With that thought, I gathered my strength, channeling all my energy into a vivid memory, one of light and warmth. I thought of the moments that had once brought joy to that family, their laughter piercing the veil of darkness. I envisioned them together, the love that had once existed overpowering the loss. As I took a deep breath, the shadows wavered, their forms faltering under my light. "I command you to release them," I cried, and as I spoke those words, a brilliant light erupted from my core, pouring out into the room like a flood. It pierced the darkness, illuminating the space and pushing the tendrils of shadow back. The shadows recoiled, screeching in protest as the light engulfed them. Faces twisted in rage morphed into expressions of agony as their dark forms disintegrated like mist under the sun. The sound of their wails echoed in my ears like a chorus of lost souls finally breaking free. But even as the shadows began to dissolve, I could feel something shifting in the air, a final struggle, a deep-rooted regret that echoed through the stillness. I concentrated on the voices surrounding me, willing myself to hear their final cries, their last wishes echoed through time. "Witness us," they howled, the shadows desperately reaching towards me one final time, trying to claw back their lost moments. I felt the ground shake beneath me as the force of their collective sadness surged like a tidal wave. I knew I had to act quickly. "I see you. I acknowledge your pain," I shouted into the whirlwind of darkness surrounding me. "You are not forgotten. Your story will be told." The wind howled like a banshee, twisting desperate shadows into tendrils that writhed against the walls. I felt their anguish wrap around me, but instead of making me afraid, it fueled my resolve. I could not let them fade away without remembering who they were, their lives, their love, their tragedy. With one last push of energy, I drew in the last remnants of warmth, letting it flow through me. The walls trembled, and light exploded from my hands, pouring into every corner of the room where shadows lingered, illuminating decades of suffering before my eyes. The shapes of the family emerged into ethereal figures, their once haunting forms now glowing with warmth and peace. "Thank you," they whispered in unison, the voices soothing against the tempest surrounding me. They began to fade, dissolving into the light, finally released from the chains that bound them to this plane of existence. But just when I thought it was over, A piercing shriek shattered the moment. The dark figure erupted from the shadows, more furious than I had ever seen, and charged straight toward me. It was a swirling mass of rage and despair, coiling around itself as it surged forward, intent on claiming me as its own. Panic surged within me. The light flickered as I instinctively backed away from the window, but I knew I couldn't let it win. I was still connected to the family, their spirits bolstering my strength, filling me with a resolute fire that refused to be snuffed out. "No!" I shouted, digging deep inside for any remnants of power I could muster. I stretched my arms wide, inviting the light to grow, illuminating every shadow that lingered in my room, every ounce of darkness trying to encroach. "Leave me!" I yelled, defiance ringing clear, echoing off the walls. A battle raged within the light, the shadows slashing angrily against the brightness, but every strike only invigorated my resolve. I concentrated harder, visualizing the warmth and love inside me, my heart pulsing with energy that was uniquely human. Each beat was a reminder that I would stand against the dark. The shadow creature recoiled, its screeches growing more frantic as radiance pushed against its form. "No, you cannot take them," I roared, my voice rising above the chaos. The light intensified, blasting forth like a supernova, pushing forth the darkness that sought to consume me. With one final surge, the darkness convulsed, tearing apart beneath my force. The room exploded with light, bright enough to blind me. As I shielded my eyes, I felt the presence of the family around me, their whispers now filled with gratitude. I was no longer battling alone. I was part of something greater than myself. And then silence. The overwhelming weight of the shadows lifted, replaced by an eerie stillness. I opened my eyes slowly, trembling as I surveyed my surroundings. The window stood wide open, moonlight flooding the room, shimmering against the walls. A soft breeze caressed my face, a gentle whisper of hope. Though the fight had been won, I knew this was not the end. The world still held many secrets, many shadows yearning to be unbound. I gazed out into the night sky, filled with stars, wondering how many more families were waiting for someone to listen, someone to help them tell their stories. Time stretched in the quiet aftermath, the breeze carrying faint echoes of the whispers I had encountered, the voices of the lost still lingering at the edge of my consciousness. Will I be able to lose myself in the stories? I mused. Can I really confront the darkest shadows that await? As I watched the light dance across my room, casting long shadows in the corners, I knew my journey had only just begun. The night still held its hauntings, and I could feel the promise of their memories intertwining with my own. This time, I would not be afraid. I would keep the window open. As I stood there, the cool breeze swirled around me, carrying scents of damp earth and decaying leaves. The wood creaked beneath my feet, and I felt a tremor of unease fluttering in my stomach. The night was alive with whispers, voices colliding and intermingling, tugging at the edges of my mind. I took a breath, trying to steady myself, and stepped closer to the window again. The moon hung low in the sky, casting silver tendrils of light across the room. Yet, even in its brightness, shadows lingered, creeping along the walls like hungry creatures waiting for a moment of distraction. I realized that those whispers were not just remnants of the past. They were alive, threads of dark energy intertwining with my very essence. And then I saw them again, the faces glimmering faintly in the moonlight. They beckoned to me with twisted smiles, eyes empty yet full of unfulfilled longing. The family I had fought to save were no longer visible in that moment, but instead, I felt a gathering of spirits, coalescing in the corners of the room, lining the walls like spectators to a grisly performance. "Help us," they murmured again and again, a chant that echoed like a heartbeat in my ears. Their sounds curled around me, drowning out my thoughts. What did they want? Were there more souls needing me to act? I wanted to turn away, to close the window and seal this nightmare off forever. But I felt something pushing me forward, a need that rooted itself deep within my bones. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. I felt cold fingertips brushing against my skin, sending shivers radiating through my body. The shadows pooled at my feet, forming into dark shapes that writhed and twisted, emanating a sense of foreboding. Paralyzing fear clawed at my throat, but I couldn't scream. My pulse quickened as I strained to catch glimpses of familiar faces among the shadows. "Please," a voice whispered, soft yet chilling, like a breeze through dried leaves. "Show us what happened." The words sent a pulse of energy through me, igniting a fire of determination. I had to uncover each story held captive within these walls before they faded into nothingness. I focused on the darkness swirling around me, feeling the tension in the air rise like a thick fog, blurring the boundary between reality and something far more sinister. I closed my eyes, letting the whispers wash over me like a tide. I felt a tug in my chest, pulling me deeper into a vision filled with sorrow and anguish. The world around me blurred into a dark abyss as I was drawn into a memory, a flickering scene of a weathered house standing alone on a barren field. The sky above was bruised, roiling with dark storm clouds that threatened to unleash their fury at any moment. Branches of dead trees clawed at the air, and the wind howled as if warning of an impending storm. I could see figures moving inside the house, shadows flitting by the windows, desperate and frantic. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of what I was witnessing. Suddenly, the front door swung open wide, crashing against the inside wall with a deafening bang. I watched as a family fled into the storm, fear painted on their faces. A mother clutched a small child to her chest while a man dragged a heavy suitcase behind him, stumbling as the wind surged against them. I strained to hear their cries, but they were lost in the storm that grew more menacing with each passing heartbeat. "Get back inside," the man yelled, panic splintering his voice as he shielded his family against the winds. "It's not safe." But as they turned to dart back into the house, a darker form emerged from the shadows, something vast and terrible, its presence like the deepest black pooling beneath an abyss. It loomed behind them, its shape blend, seamlessly with the darkness, taking form like a predator gearing up to pounce. They didn't see it at first, lost in their terror of the storm. I felt a rush of urgency, but there was nothing I could do. I was trapped, a spectator in a nightmare. The storm raged on, whipping the air into chaos, the shadows closing in like a noose tightening around the family. Then, in a sudden, gut-wrenching moment, I saw the creature sprint forward, sweeping through the door in a blur of malevolence. It was fast, its outline shifting unnaturally, twisting and contorting with bizarre grace. The mother screamed, her voice piercing the air as the shadows engulfed them, swallowing their final echoes. Just as the scene darkened into nothingness, I felt a sharp jolt, and I was thrust back into my own room, gasping for breath. My heart raced in my chest, and the once comforting glow of the moonlight was now unnerving. All around me, shadows swirled like a living nightmare, and I could still hear the echoes of the family's cries for help haunting my ears. I stumbled away from the window, desperate to find solace in the safety of my own space. But the shadows followed, flickering in my periphery. I turned, ready to confront the darkness encroaching upon me, when I noticed shapes forming in the corners, thousands of faces pressing against the walls, desperate for someone to see them. A voice broke through the darkness again, resonating like a distant bell tolling in a fog. "Help us," it cried, trembling with the weight of suffering. I felt my heart clench. This urgency was overwhelming. A flood of emotions windows through me as I realized I couldn't ignore their cries any longer. But just as I prepared to reach out, a shatter of glass erupted from the nearby room, a violent crash that pierced through my thoughts. My heart seized, terror gripping me as I turned to face the source of the noise. The shadows flickered into light, laughing softly in their eerie, guttural way, and I felt an icy pit grow in my stomach. I stepped cautiously towards the sound, every fiber of my being on high alert. My breath wavered as I approached the doorway, inching closer to the darkness beyond. The light from the window barely reached this part of the room, creating a shroud of darkness so thick that I could barely make out the scene before me. The room was ruined, a table tipped over, shards of glass glinting ominously in the dark. I could feel the atmosphere heavy with dread, the kind that seeped into my skin and twisted its way through my veins. Just then, I noticed something moving among the detritus, something small and darker than the shadows themselves. I squinted, forcing my eyes to adjust, and a chill ran down my spine as I realized what it was. A small doll, its glassy eyes staring blankly at me from the floor, was soaked in darkness. As I knelt to pick it up, I felt an overwhelming chill, as though the very essence of the room had turned cold. The doll seemed so innocent, almost sweet. Its tiny dress was frayed, a remnant of someone's love, a juxtaposition against the malevolence that hung in the air. As I held it, a strange feeling washed over me. The silence grew heavier, tight around my chest as an icy wind howled through the broken window, twisting around me like the tendrils of a dark fog. And then I heard it, a soft, giggling sound coming from the shadows beyond the room. My skin prickled as the laughter tinkled like glass breaking, echoing eerily through the atmosphere. I felt the darkness shift, pulling tighter around me as the giggling intensified. Boundary lines began to blur. "Join us," they whispered, voices merging from the inky depths, pleading and beckoning like a twisted chorus. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling, but the giggles only grew louder, wrapping around me like a sinister embrace. The doll felt heavy in my hands, as if it pulsed with a life of its own. I could sense its need, desperate and hollow, an echo of sorrow that reverberated with the shadows swirling in the corners. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced, taking shape, forming a group of ghastly figures that drifted toward me, their faces pale and pinched, eyes wide with a chilling mixture of hope and despair. "Help us find her," they chorused, their voices a haunting melody, carrying the weight of years lost. The room lunged forward, the air thick with their wishes, entwining with my own confusion and growing dread. I could feel their presence, the heat of their sorrow brushing against my flesh. My heart raced as they stepped closer, their forms shifting in and out of view, flickering like the last embers of a dying flame. "Who do you want me to find?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, as each figure stretched their hands towards the doll in my grasp, the shadows curling around us like tendrils of smoke. "The little girl," they implored in unison, a mixture of anger and longing swirling in the air. "She must be freed." My heart plummeted. The images from the stormy night flooded my mind again. The family fighting against darkness, the mother and child struggling to escape. I hadn't done enough. Their story wasn't finished. "Let me help you," I promised, feeling a blend of fear and resolve wash over me. The figures nodded, their motion sending ripples through the shadows. "Find her before it's too late," they urged, their voices merging into one desperate plea that resonated throughout the crumbling room. Just as I felt the weight of their needs settle within me, the air grew still, a quiet before a storm. The movement around me ceased. I realized with a jolt that the figure of the dark creature was returning, its form materializing from the depths of despair. It lunged forward with an otherworldly shriek, its shadowy figure expanding as if to consume everything in its wake. "Not again!" I shouted, gripping the doll tighter, a surge of bravery spiraling through me. The whispers peaked into a frantic chorus as the shadows pushed back, melded into one swirling entity of grief and anger. I felt their energy pulsating through the air, and in that moment I understood what I had to do. I raised the doll high, channeling my fervor into its lifeless form, determined to unravel the strings binding it to this cursed space. "I won't let you take them," I cried, focusing on the essence of collective memories, on the love that had once existed and stitched the family together. With that, a brilliant light ignited, cascading through the shadows as I poured everything I had into what I hoped was a connection to the memory of the little girl. I envisioned her face, innocent and bright, reminding me of the importance of preserving their legacy. The dark figure shrieked in horror, recoiling as the light surged forward, engulfing the shadows in a wave of brilliant energy. The figures of the family began to materialize once again, glowing with a soft radiance. They reached out toward me, and I felt their gratitude filling the room, weaving through the growing luminosity. But the dark creature would not go quietly. It writhed and twisted, its form battling against the light. I could see its panic rising, as though I had touched a core of its being, a ragged remnant of its own existence. "You cannot save them," it bellowed, the darkness swirling around me in a violent storm, trying to snatch the light away. "Watch me," I shouted defiantly. "You don't own their story anymore." With trembling hands, I focused even harder, tightening my grip on the doll, envisioning the connection I shared with its history. The silhouettes of the family reached out, hovering at the edge of darkness, their light intertwining with mine as I felt the air grow hot with energy, a pulse of hope unfurling like a flower against the relentless night. "Together," I urged, guiding the chant of their names through my lips as if it were a beacon illuminating through the dark. Suddenly, a deafening sound shattered the night. The force of the light colliding with the darkness erupted like thunder. I felt the surge push me backward, but I stood my ground, eyes locked on the writhing figure. The darkness shattered like glass, showering the room with fragments of shadow that blinked out of existence, replaced by a radiant glow. In that moment, the family emerged fully, illuminated by the purest light. They shared in that moment of liberation, their faces filled with peace and joy, their connection stronger than any darkness that sought to claim them. And then, with a final whispery chorus of thanks, they faded into the warmth of light, leaving the doll in my hands, somehow lighter now. I looked down as it sparked with vibrancy, hope brimming within its tiny eyes. But even as I felt relief wash over me, I sensed a lingering chill in the air. The dark creature had been banished, but its energy still echoed, lurking beyond my consciousness like a shadow waiting in ambush. I could almost feel its presence surging outside, waiting for the moment I would let my guard down. A shiver skittered down my spine, an instinctive warning. The room felt hollow, eerily quiet now, almost as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. I turned, looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the dark figure materializing again. But instead, I was greeted by stillness. Yet the stillness was unsettling. Every creak of the old house felt amplified, like a heartbeat echoing in the silence. I clutched the doll tightly, feeling its small weight in my palm, a comforting reminder that I had done something good, something right. But doubt weighed heavy on my mind. Had I truly defeated the darkness? Or was it merely lying in wait, gaining strength again? Despite the weight pressing down on me, I moved toward the window, hoping the moonlight would provide some comfort. But it was now obscured by thick clouds, the shadows crawling closer, creeping along the edges of the room like fingers seeking warmth. I stepped back, my heart racing as I caught a faint whisper in the air, fragile yet clear, a child's voice, soft and pleading. "Help me!" I froze, terror paralyzing my limbs. The voice floated through the room, moving like smoke, curling around me, leaving a trail of ice in its wake. "Where are you?" I asked, but the only response was silence, oppressive and heavy. The shadows seemed to lean closer, as if they were drawn to my fear, eager to capitalize on my unease. The air grew thick with tension, and I felt an overwhelming urge to flee the room, but I stood my ground. I wouldn't run. They needed me, and I would not be afraid. Not anymore. I took a deep breath, calling out, "Show yourself." At that moment, the walls groaned, and I watched in horror as your shadows twisted and coiled, pulsating with energy. I squinted, trying to focus on the swirling darkness, straining to see anything beyond the mists. Then, like a flame flickering in the wind, I saw a figure emerge, its outline wretched and distorted. My heart sank as I recognized the familiar face. A little girl, her eyes wide with terror, trapped within the very shadows I had fought to banish just moments before. She reached toward me, her thin arms stretching out as if begging for help. "Please," she whimpered, her voice choked with fear. "I can't find my way home." A rush of empathy flooded through me, mixing with fear and determination. "Stay with me," I urged, feeling the oppressive shadows pressing against my back. "I'll get you out of here." But as I stepped closer, the darkness writhed and slithered, curling around her, obscuring her small frame. I could sense its rage growing, fueled by my resolve, waiting for an opportunity to snatch her back into the abyss. "No, you can't take her," I shouted, fear igniting within me. The girl's eyes shone with a mix of hope and desperation. "The door," she whispered, pointing to the corner of the room where shadows twisted like serpents. "It's behind the shadows." I turned, my heart pounding. There it was, a door barely visible, an outline in the gloom, seemingly forgotten by time. It was different from the room I stood in, dark and foreboding, yet the girl's gaze urged me forward. I took a step, but as I did, the shadows lunged at me, angry whispers swirling in a chaotic chorus. "You cannot help her," they screamed, voices mingling until they became indistinguishable from the raw roar of the wind outside. "You belong to us." I felt my pulse thundering in my ears, their anger striking a chord of dread deep within me. "Get away!" I shouted, forcing myself to take another step. The darkness coiled tighter, a suffocating embrace, but I pushed through, biting back my fear. I would not abandon her. "Stay with me," I called to the girl, who trembled, her spectral form flickering as the shadows fought for dominion. With every ounce of energy I had left, I focused my thoughts, channeling the warmth and hope I had felt when freeing the family. I lifted the doll high, its surface shimmering in what little light remained. "Together, we can break this," I yelled, my voice resonating with strength. The shadows surged, boiling over like a raging sea. I could feel their frustration and fury rising, pressing against me, threatening to drown me out. "You think light can conquer darkness?" they hissed. "You know nothing." The temperature dropped as they hissed their scorn. I shivered but steadied myself, grounding my feet against the floor. "I will not give up," I screamed, my breath billowing out like a stream of fire in the cold. "You are nothing but a memory, a nightmare. I will fight you." Then I charged toward the door with determination, the shadows closing in on me, swirling around like a dark storm, their whispers a cacophony of despair and rage. The girl's frightened gaze locked onto mine. "Help me!" she cried again, and that cry ignited a new resolve within me. I grasped the doorknob, and as I twisted it, the shadows recoiled, writhing back from the light that spilled through the crack. I could feel a warmth beginning to radiate from the core of my being, a power deep within me fueled by every soul I had encountered and fought to save. As the door creaked open, a blinding light surged outward, illuminating the room in a brilliant glow that cut through the darkness like a sword. The shadows shrieked, their cries echoing painfully against the walls, but I felt the girl's warmth, her presence guiding me. I pulled her along, and together we stepped into the light. In an instant, the shadows shattered, splintered into nothingness, leaving a vacant silence in their wake. The glow stretched around us, pulling us deeper into its embrace, and I could almost hear the scattered memories of the family, the lost souls, resonating with my heartbeat. But as I turned to look back at the room, a flicker of movement caught my eye. The dark form reared its head one final time, a shadow of rage flaring against the brilliant light. Its mouth opened wide, the darkness spilling out like smoke, reaching for me, aiming to claim me back into its abyss. "No!" I yelled, clutching the doll and the girl tightly, feeling their warmth melding into my own as together we moved forward. I wouldn't allow it to have me. This time, I would escape. With one last surge of will, I pushed harder against the door, focusing on the light that now filled my vision. I felt the girl's small hand grasp mine, her presence giving me strength, and we stepped forward together, daring the darkness to follow. The moment we crossed through the threshold, the air crackled with energy, and the shadows dissolved into the ether, leaving nothing but a fascinating trace. My breath caught in my throat as everything around us began to blur, the space shifting and warping as reality bent under the weight of my resolve. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the world stilled. I was standing in an empty void, surrounded by nothingness. The faint echoes of the girl's presence lingered still, like sunlight filtering through a dense fog. I glanced around, searching for her, the fear that crept into my heart threatening to steal my breath. "Where are you?" I called out, voice quavering in the silence. And then a tiny giggle floated through the air, filling the void with warmth. "I'm right here," she chimed, her laughter ringing like bells. A swirl of light caught my eye, and suddenly, she appeared beside me, illuminated and vibrant. Her small face beamed up at me, framed by a halo of warmth that pushed back the darkness lingering on the edges of my mind. "You helped me," she exclaimed. "You freed us all." I looked into her eyes, realizing the warmth I felt was more than just a fleeting moment. It was the lifeblood of their combined hopes, their stories intertwined with mine. I felt lighter, buoyed by the promise of new beginnings, the echoes of the battles we had fought pushing me forward. Yet deep down, a nagging feeling tugged at me. I had faced the darkness, but I hadn't completely silenced it. Just the knowledge of its existence was enough to keep me on edge, like a predator watching from the shadows, waiting for the opportune moment to pounce. "Will they find peace now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The girl nodded, her expression thoughtful, yet there was something shadowy flickering in her eyes. "But there are still others," she replied softly. "More who need help, more who are lost." Her words sent a rush of fear through me. But amidst that fear was the realization that my journey was far from over. If there were other souls trapped in darkness, I couldn't turn my back on them. I wouldn't allow despair to swallow anyone else. "Then we need to save them," I said, the conviction hardening within me. I felt the light in the void fluttering at my side, echoing the presence of hope that had become a part of me. "We'll find a way." The girl smiled, full of faith and determination. "Together," she affirmed, and I could feel the weight of the world shifting, making room for something new. The shadows might linger, but they wouldn't define us. Suddenly, the void shimmered, the edges starting to reveal new shapes and colors, hints of vibrant energy beckoning on the horizon. I took a step forward, feeling the girl's hand squeeze mine, emboldening me to move further into the unknown. "Let's go," I urged, resolute in my purpose, ready to face whatever darkness awaited, prepared to confront the fears that lay beneath and uncover the light that did not waver. As I stepped into the unfolding brilliance, I felt the echoes of every soul I had met. They swirled around me, guiding me deeper into the mysteries of the night, toward the secrets yet to be revealed. The adventure had just begun. As I stepped into the unfolding brilliance, a sense of anticipation surged within me. I could feel the air thickening around us, the warmth of the light wrapping around me like a protective cloak. My heart raced as I ventured deeper, every step echoing with the promise of discovery, yet the gnawing fear of what lay ahead kept me on edge. The colors swirled and shifted, pulsating with an eerie vibrance that felt almost alive. Shadows flitted at the corners of my vision, like specters playground with my senses, testing the resolve I had just summoned. I glanced at the girl beside me, her eyes filled with a curious sparkle, but I could see confusion creep in when she scanned the strange landscape around us, a world shifting as if it breathed. "Do you feel that?" I asked, my voice a blend of excitement and caution, trying to mask the trepidation rising within me. She nodded slowly, her gaze focused as if trying to make sense of the path ahead. It feels different, like we're not alone. Just then, a ripple of cold air sliced through the warmth, causing both of us to shudder. The light around us dimmed, leaving only whispers, soft and haunting, echoing in the chasm of the void. I strained to hear, and the words formed into fragmented sentences, haunting reminders of lost souls lingering in grief. "Help me, please. I'm trapped." I could feel the chill bearing down, grinding against my resolve. "It's coming from over there," I called out, pointing toward a dim flicker in the distance, a wisp of shadow that curled around a dying light. With each step I took, the ground beneath felt unsteady, almost as if it were shifting to keep me from advancing. I hesitated, the weight of dread coiling around my stomach. What if it's a trick? I voiced softly, but I couldn't ignore the pull of the voices. They were begging for help, and it filled me with an unshakable determination. "We can't turn back now," the girl urged, her small hand gripping mine tightly. Her courage ignited a flame within me that pushed away my reservations. Together, we moved forward, winding through the thick mist that accompanied us, the air saturated with desperation. As we approached the flickering light, the atmosphere grew heavier, charged with tension. I caught glimpses of figures swirling around us. Wisps of shadow flitted by, their forms indistinct, faces twisted in anguish, mouths moving as though they were screaming, but no sound escaped. I flinched, the sensation of being watched prickling my skin. Suddenly, one of the shadows surged forward, a smoky apparition that coiled around my feet, drawing me down. "Stay away!" I yelled, trying to shake it off, but it wrapped tighter, a serpent coiling around my legs. Panic surged, and I could feel the girl pulling back, uncertainty flashing across her face as she glanced at the swirling mass. In desperation, I tried to remember the light I had summoned before, the warmth I had felt when freeing the doll. I envisioned that brightness spilling from within me, calling upon the strength of the souls bonded together in this fight. "Leave us alone!" I shouted, raising my hands as though to push the darkness away. The shadow hesitated, twisting as if confused by my defiance. A low, growling laughter erupted, sending chills down my spine. "You think you can resist? You belong to us now." I felt the weight of its words, a sinister promise of despair that threatened to drown me. It pulled harder, the chill cutting through my clothes, breath frosting in the air as the laughing crowd of shadows encircled us. I was losing my grip, but then I heard the girl's voice, a steady whisper that cut through my fear. "Remember the light," she rallied, her own courage spilling over into mine. I took a deep breath, channeling her faith, focusing on the warmth within, igniting a blaze that surged to the surface. With a fierce yell, I thrust my arms forward, envisioning the light pouring out like a sun breaking through a storm. The shadow tightened, hissing and recoiling as a brilliant radiance surged around me. I felt the warmth radiate off the walls of the void, illuminating the darkness and causing the shadows to scatter like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. But as I reveled in the momentary victory, the laughter turned into a horrid wail, a sound that clawed at my insides, echoing with despair. "You can't escape that easily." Something monstrous began to form within the dark, a ghastly amalgamation of anguish and shadows. Limbs elongated, twisting grotesquely into long, spindly fingers that clawed toward me, its eyes glowing with a sickly gleam. The fear that had hovered quietly in the corner of my mind erupted anew, paralyzing me as I faced the creature pulsating with darkness, a tidal wave of terrifying energy crashing toward us. And just as I felt myself teetering on the brink of panic, the girl beside me stepped forward, a small figure silhouetted against the overwhelming blackness. "We have to go," she screamed, tugging at my arm, her own fear blending with determination. That reminder jolted me back. I couldn't allow the darkness to take her too. I shoved forward and grabbed the girl's hand, my fingers entwined with her smaller ones, and together we ran through the brightness, deeper into the light beyond the shadows. As we fled, darkness nipped at our heels, jagged and relentless, whispering threats of its imminent return. You can't hide from us. You will always belong. With every step, I could feel the weight of despair trying to drag us back, the howls of lost souls rising around us. But with the girl's hand firmly in mine, we pressed on, navigating through the swirling mist that threatened to envelop us entirely. I pushed back against every doubt that surfaced, every voice that tried to dissuade me, focusing on the destination that beckoned just beyond the oppressive gloom. A flicker of brilliance appeared ahead, a doorway shimmering with promise amidst the chaos surrounding us. "Keep going," I shouted, my voice mingling with our racing hearts. The turmoil swirled thicker around us, but the light intensified as we drew closer, banishing the shadows that slithered toward us, suffocating their advance. As we approached the glowing entrance, I could feel the encroaching darkness pulling me back, the shadows recoiling in defiance. Fear pierced through me while the creature's laughter echoed behind, sinister and haunting. But I couldn't let that stop me. I refused. With one final surge of determination, we lunged for the doorway. The light enveloped us, a cocoon of warmth and protection, and as we passed through the threshold, the howls of despair melted into silence. Yet as the brightness enveloped us, I felt an unsettling pressure, as if something unseen was waiting, lurking in the far corners of the light. "What's next?" the girl whispered, unease shaping her voice. "Whatever it is," I replied, glancing back into the dimness from where we had come. "We'll face it together." But despite my words, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was merely biding its time, preparing for another strike. The thought knotted in my stomach as I peered into the new space, the light washing over us, revealing yet another world tinged with intensity, where the unknown twisted and writhed around us like an unseen beast waiting to reveal its true self. A new adventure awaited, but I could sense the shadows were not far behind, and with that thought, I steeled myself for whatever horrors lay ahead. As I ventured into this new realm, the brilliance of the light pulsed rhythmically, a heartbeat echoing through the oppressive quiet. Yet beneath the shimmering surface, a sense of dread coiled tightly around my chest, whispering fears I didn't want to acknowledge. The girl beside me remained steadfast, her presence grounding my spiraling thoughts, but I could sense her unease as well. The air was charged with a strange energy, thick and heavy, as though the very atmosphere was holding its breath, waiting. I looked around, squinting against the brightness that seemed almost too bright, illuminating shapes in distorted and unsettling ways. The landscape twisted and warped, as if struggling to form a coherent space where we could find refuge. Shadows flickered at the edges, teasing my vision, daring me to step closer. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, afraid that speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile calm. The girl shrugged, her brow furrowed in deep thought, and I could tell she was trying to make sense of the unsettling scene before us. Suddenly, the dazzling light flickered, dimming momentarily like a dying star, and I felt my heart skip a beat. In that fleeting darkness, I glimpsed a figure in the distance, a tall silhouette shrouded in dark mist that blended seamlessly with the shifting shadows. I swallowed hard, dread creeping back as I locked eyes with the damnable entity, a presence that made my skin crawl. It didn't move, just stood there watching, waiting like a predator that had found its prey. "What is that?" I breathed, my voice trembling. "I don't know," she replied, her wide eyes reflecting my own fear. "But we shouldn't stay here." The figure began to transform, shifting as if the shadows were being pulled into a vortex, shaping a face that was familiar yet distorted. My blood turned to ice when I realized it looked like someone I once knew, a loved one lost to time, their features twisted in agony and despair. "Help me," it called out in a haunting whisper that sent shivers down my spine, a voice echoing in the hollow chambers of my memory. "Don't listen to it," I shouted, pulling on the girl's hand, and together we stumbled backward. The moment we moved, the shadowy figure dissolved into a mass of darkness, filling the air with a swirling fog that blocked every direction. I could hear the echo of laughter behind us, mocking, chilling, intertwining with anguished screams that reverberated through the gloom. In a desperate bid for safety, I turned to run, dragging the girl alongside me. But the environment shifted around us, the ground beneath our feet morphing into slick stones, almost as if we were on a teetering cliff. The walls of light began to show cracks, dark veins spreading like a disease, threatening to swallow the brilliance. Panic surged through me as I stumbled, almost losing my balance as the terrain twisted further into chaos. "Look," the girl cried, pointing at something in the swirling shadows. My heart raced as my eyes followed her gesture, my throat tightening with fear as I saw more shapes emerging. Figures trapped in the haze, their faces twisted in silent screams. They reached out, fingers brushing against the light. But with every inch they moved closer, the brightness dimmed, struggling against the encroaching gloom. "We have to help them," she exclaimed, determination igniting in her voice. But something deep within me urged caution. As brave as she was, I felt that stepping closer would mean giving in to the grasp of darkness gathering around us. "They're lost," she pleaded, desperation creeping into her tone. "No, we'll fall into it too," I countered, my heart pounding against my ribs as panic clawed at my insides. Just then, one of the faces in the shadows turned toward me, and in that moment, their eyes locked onto mine, an intense gaze filled with pleading desperation that crushed my resolve. Without thinking, I took a step forward, compelled by an instinct I couldn't control. The girl yanked me back, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "No," she cried, "we can't trust them." Around us, the shadows thickened, sucking the warmth from the air, their whispers rising to a crescendo. "Help us," they chanted, a chorus of lost souls, echoing in pleas that sent waves of dread coursing through my veins. I felt my vision blur as dark tendrils began to reach for me, cold fingers brushing my skin, dragging me closer to the brink where darkness reigned. "Fight it!" I shouted, shaking my head vigorously, trying to break free from the pull of despair. "We can't give in." Just as the shadows seemed poised to take us, I summoned every ounce of strength I had left, focusing on the blinding light we had seen earlier. If I just concentrated, if I could let it illuminate the fear swirling around us, perhaps it could push the darkness back. As the light flickered to life within me, I raised my hands, a surge of warmth bubbling up as I hoped it would resonate with the trapped souls. "We're here to help," I shouted into the tumult, forcing the light to shine brighter, dispelling the shadows that clawed at my heart. But the moment the brightness surged forth, the laughter returned, a cacophony of violence rippling through the very fabric of space. "You cannot save them, nor yourself," it howled, the air turning frigid, every shadow coiling tighter and tighter around the two of us. With each pulse of light, the shadows shrieked, a sound that felt like teeth scraping across bone. I gritted my teeth against the rising dread. Yes, I could feel it burrowing deep, whispering dark thoughts that threatened to tear my resolve apart. "Keep going. We can make it, I know it," I urged the girl, my voice edged with urgency. But even as I spoke, the shadows began to morph again, twisting not only into anguished faces, but into grotesque figures with elongated limbs and gaping mouths. Their eyes glowed in the semi-darkness, hollow with hunger as they glared at us, their silent pleas turning into howls of torment. "They're losing hope," I realized, panic gripping me tight. "We have to keep them from fading." I felt a sudden rush of fire burning within, a realization that the only thing that could combat this darkness was hope. So I gathered every ounce of that warmth and directed it towards the figures trapped in despair, willing them to see the glimmering brightness beyond their pain. "You're not alone," I shouted into the void, my voice piercing through the cacophony. But the shadows roared in defiance, lashing out as they encircled us like a consuming whirlwind. I could feel the weight of their despair crushing down, threatening to drag us into the depths of oblivion. Each second felt like an eternity as the laughter grew louder, swirling around us in a grotesque symphony of chaos, feeding on the fear that gripped my heart. "Louder!" the girl shouted, breaking through my thoughts. "We can drown them out!" And so I took a deep breath, letting out a primal scream that mingled with her cry of defiance, echoing through the cavernous void. We will not succumb. In that moment, a blinding light burst forth from within us, illuminating the darkness in a way I couldn't have imagined. Each face contorted in the shadows began to flicker and fade as rays of light lanced through the suffocating darkness, pushing the figures backward, illuminating the void where they had once loomed. Yet even in that moment of breaking through, I could sense how quickly the shadows were regrouping, reforming, and they would not let us go without a fight. Screams erupted as the grasp of despair clung to my soul, urging me to look back, to give in. I could feel the darkness gnawing at my sanity, trying to pull me into its depths, but I kept focusing on the light, feeding it with every emotion I had left. And that was when I noticed something changing. The girl's light began to merge with mine, creating an ethereal glow that pulsed brighter than anything I had seen before. "We can do this," she cried, a fierce determination burning in her eyes. With renewed strength, we pushed against the shadows, channeling every ounce of hope and light we could muster. The shadows screamed, howled, and pushed against our united force. But as we moved forward together, we began to break through the veil of despair. The wails subsided into whispers, and the faces pulled back into darkness as we surged ahead, pushing further, deeper into the realm beyond the chaos. But just as we took our final steps, a force erupted behind us, a malevolent wave of fury that slammed into me like a physical blow. I stumbled, my vision blurring as I was knocked off balance. "No!" the girl screamed, reaching for me, but the shadows were quicker, a dark tide swallowing me whole, pulling me back into their embrace. In that moment of terror, I felt everything begin to break apart. The light dimmed, flickering like an old candle struggling to stay lit. I could see the girl's haunted face, her eyes wide with fear, longing to pull me free from the clutches of darkness. But the shadows wrapped around my body, twisting tighter, their whispers now a chaotic storm. "Join us," they hissed, their voices a chilling symphony that made every hair on my body stand on end. And with all the strength I could muster, I clutched desperately at the light embedded in my heart, the flickering hope resisting their grasp, willing it not to fade. I could hear it deep within, the promise of freedom and light. I refused to be consumed, refused to surrender. If I could ignite that flame, perhaps it would not only save me, but it would save her too. "Together!" I shouted, the remnants of my spirit rising against the onslaught. "We can break free!" With one last push of will, I turned my face toward the figure still looming behind us, the shadows thrashing around it. "I will not be yours!" I yelled, defiance spilling from the depths of my heart as I summoned the angular edges of the light inside, letting it rush forth like an unstoppable wave. And just as I thought I would be consumed entirely, the pulse of light burst forth, flooding the space around us. A brilliant explosion that dissolved the thick darkness, forcing the shadows to wail in agony and retreat. The moment I felt the grip of despair loosen, I reached out one more time. The girl grasped my hand, our fingers intertwining as we both shouted together, "Hope lives! It will survive!" The figures scattered like leaves in a tempest, the shrieks fading into the cool silence. I felt myself being lifted, almost as if being carried by the luminous force we had summoned together. When I opened my eyes, I found us standing in an endless expanse of light, free from the suffocating darkness that had threatened to consume us. We stood silent for a moment, overwhelmed and awash in a sense of victory, but I knew the shadows would not rest easily. Their echoing laughter hung in the air, taunting us, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. The landscape before us shifted, swirling like a kaleidoscope, and in that moment I realized we were still in the depths of unknown danger. The journey was far from over, and the shadows were merely retreating to gather their strength. "We need to keep moving," I muttered, fear creeping back into my mind even as victory coursed through my veins. I grasped the girl's hand tighter, feeling her warmth mix with my own, the light of hope still surging within us. "Yes, let's find a way out," she replied, her voice steady, even though I could see the flicker of doubt crossing her face. Together, we stepped forward into the swirling matrix of color, the shadows lingering just on the periphery of our vision, waiting for the moment to strike back. With each step, I felt myself preparing for the next confrontation, aware that our battle had only just begun. Each heartbeat rang like a bell in my ears, echoing through the stillness where the darkness hid, hovering in the spaces between the light. As we pressed onward, I could feel the malevolent force still lurking, watching, planning its next move. But this time, we would be ready. Together, we would face whatever horrors awaited us, united against the creeping tendrils of shadow that sought to drag us down into the abyss. And with that thought, I realized that the shadows of our past would only push us further into the light of our future. As I stepped into the swirling maze of colors and light, anxiety gnawed at me like a rat in a trap. I could feel the darkness just behind us, waiting for the perfect moment to lash out. I grabbed the girl's hand, our fingers interlocked, a tether against the chaos that threatened to pull us apart. Around us, the vibrant hues began to shift, transforming into ominous shades, deep purples and sickly greens that twisted and lurked. The laughter from the shadows faded into an unsettling silence, an expectation building like a tightening noose. "Stay close," I whispered, my voice slicing through the heavy air. The girl nodded, but I could see uncertainty clouding her expression. The brightness that had saved us before flickered momentarily, sending a shiver down my spine. It felt like a warning, a tug of the unknown at the back of my mind. As we moved deeper, the once bright landscape began to distort. The atmosphere thickened, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. The colors drained away, revealing skeletal trees that loomed like twisted fingers reaching for an unseen sky, their branches creaking with every breath of wind. A sense of foreboding settled over me, each step forward feeling like a step deeper into a nightmare. Suddenly, a screech pierced the silence, shrill and terrifying. I froze, the sound slicing through my thoughts, as if summoned from the depths of my own fears. The girl jumped, her grip tightening around my hand. "What was that?" she gasped, looking around at the darkening edges of our surroundings. "Just keep moving," I urged, but my voice trembled, betraying my own fear. We took another cautious step, and from the corner of my eye, I glimpsed movement among the trees. Figures flitting, vanishing into the shadows the moment I turned to look. I couldn't shake the sense of being watched, stalked by unseen entities lurking just beyond reach. The air grew colder, each breath I took like inhaling ice. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat a reminder of the danger that slithered closer. "We have to find a way out," I muttered. "But where?" The path ahead twisted endlessly into a labyrinth of despair. Then, without warning, the moment shattered. From the depths of the twisted trees, a pale figure emerged, gliding toward us on sinewy legs that seemed to flow like water. Its face was shrouded, features hidden beneath a hood that dripped shadows like ink. I could feel its gaze boring into me, sensing a hunger that gnawed at the fabric of my very soul. "Do not turn away," it whispered, voice sliding through the air like a serpent. "You belong to the shadows. Back away," I shouted, instinct taking over, pushing the girl behind me. My heart raced as I took a step forward, desperate to confront the horror before me. "You don't own us. We won't be yours." But the figure simply tilted its head, and suddenly, the shadows around us surged, moldy darkness coiling at our feet like living vines. "You cannot escape," it taunted, its voice a chilling echo that sent a wave of despair crashing over me. "You will be one of us." I felt the shadow tendrils wrapping around my ankles, pulling me down, the weight of it like shackles against my will. I fought against it, my voice rising in defiance. "We will not surrender. With a burst of determination, I gathered the light deep within, closed my eyes, and let it explode outward. The brilliance surged, burning away the encroaching darkness, sending the figure reeling back with a howl of agony. As the light expanded, I felt the girl's presence beside me, her strength merging with mine. Together, we unleashed the warmth, driving away the hungry shadows that had threatened to consume us. The figure recoiled further, its form beginning to disintegrate, yet its voice echoed hauntingly as it faded. This is not over. The shadows will always come for you. Even as the darkness retreated, I sensed it lurking at the edges, patient and scheming. We need to keep moving, I said through gritted teeth, scanning our surroundings for any signs of danger creeping back. The path opened before us, warped and twisted, but I knew it was necessary to press forward. From behind, I could hear the guttural sounds of the shadows regathering, their whispers an ominous promise that they wouldn't relent. We stumbled through the enormous, gnarled trees, trying to ignore the haunting silence growing thicker around us. The atmosphere felt charged, regulated by unthinkable forces that played beneath the surface. My instincts told me of presence just beneath the muck of the ground we walked on, threats lurking among the roots and detritus that were all too eager to draw us back into the darkness. As I rushed deeper into the bizarre twilight, I noticed the girl was getting paler, her steps slower. "Are you okay?" I asked, the concern knotting in my stomach. She nodded, but I could see the strain in her eyes, the fear creeping back as shadows writhed at our heels. I feel a resonance," she said, her voice quivering, like something is waiting, something that knows us. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the shadow figure stalking us once more, but there was only the encroaching dimness that gnawed at the edges of our path. "No matter what, we stick together, all right?" I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. With a forced nod, we pressed onward, the heavy silence an almost tangible weight. Each crack of a twig sent my heart racing. Every rustle of leaves made me jump, and as each moment passed, I could feel the whispers rise again, woven into the very fabric of the darkness. "Help!" A voice suddenly called from a distance, overlapping and disjointed, like a grainy radio transmission. "Help me!" I froze again, this time instinctively pulling the girl closer. "Do you hear that?" I said in a hushed tone. The voice was sharp and desperate, and while a part of me screamed to run, another part was drawn to it, an urge to save whoever was lost. "Maybe we should see," she whispered, desire mirrored in her eyes, though I could see the flicker of fear there too. "No," I said firmly, unwilling to risk it. "We need to move on." But before I could pull her away, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead, hunched and ragged, its skin gray and mottled, like the crumbling bark of the twisted trees. Its eyes were hollow, gazing toward us, a chilling embodiment of despair that struck terror straight through my bones. "Please," it rasped, a sound like scraping metal. "Help me? I'm trapped." "No," I said, guiding the girl slowly backward, anxiety swelling within. "We can't help it. It's a trick." As I held firm, the figure lurched forward, its limbs grotesquely elongated, scraping against the ground as it crawled desperately toward us. "I was like you. I tried to escape. The shadows, they never release you." Its voice echoed eerily, chilling me to the core. With each word, I felt the pull of its despair, tempting me to sympathize, urging me to take pity. "Don't look at it," I commanded, feeling the girl's grip grow weaker. I could see her resolve beginning to crumble under the weight of the wretched creature's plea. "Please," it whispered again, the sorrow creeping into every syllable. "Let me show you the way to freedom." I squeezed the girl's hand and turned away, urging her to follow me as I stumbled backward. "We have to go. We can't lose sight of the path." The creature's voice twisted into an anguished scream, a sound that ricocheted through the trees, reverberating off the shadows that slithered around in anticipation. "You can't escape what you are. You will see." We ran then, propelled forward by fear and adrenaline, the darkness clawing at our backs as we fled further into the unknown. But even as we put distance between us and that wretched figure, I could feel the shadows shifting, drifting ever closer, murmuring secrets that crept into my mind. "Stay strong," I whispered to the girl, my voice a thread of comfort against the rising panic. Yet deep down, I understood the truth. The shadows were never far behind, a persistent reminder that our struggle was far from over. We emerged into what seemed to be a clearing, where silhouettes danced in the air like marionettes on unseen strings. The light shimmered around us, but in the flicks and flashes, I could see forms twisting and contorting, merging with the shadows in a mad representation of chaos. A cold breeze washed over me, and I shivered as the air filled with the echoes of lost souls. Each note a reminder of our own mortality, a chorus of despair that pressed in from all sides. I felt the girl shudder beside me, and I knew we couldn't linger here. "Let's keep moving," I urged, my heart racing as I pushed past the specters flitting through the clearing. Their gazes seemed to pull at me, but I turned my head away, refusing to meet their mournful stares. I could almost hear them calling out, hollow echoes of lost dreams. But even as we pressed onward, I could feel the ground beneath us shifting, twisting once again. Shadows swirled, blending into the very fabric of the clearing, painting the earth with a sense of unease. Suddenly, a figure lunged from the edge of the trees, darting toward us with startling speed. I raised my hands instinctively, heart pounding as a scream lodged in my throat. It was a wretch of darkness, shrouded in the murk, its form a twisted mass of limbs and shadow, its eyes glinting with a malevolent hunger. "Run!" I shouted, yanking the girl's hand and racing away as panic surged through me. The creature howled in frustration, a guttural sound that sent tremors through the air, pursuing us with an unrelenting ferocity. The trees closed in around us, branches clawing at our skin like grasping fingers. I could feel the suffocating weight of despair trying to crush me down, and the shadows writhed hungrily at my heels, a tide of darkness threatening to sweep us away. We dashed through the forest, adrenaline fueling each frantic step, racing against the rising tide of the shadows that crept closer. Every heartbeat echoed louder, a drum signaling the danger that lurked just beyond the edges of my perception, ready to pounce. Then I heard it again, the call, low and haunting, beckoning from the horizon. "Help! Help us!" The words faded and transformed into a cacophony of tortured cries, a symphony of anguish that rattled my bones. "We can't stop!" I shouted, my own voice thin and strained against the cacophony that pressed in from all sides. But the girl hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the shadows that danced around us. "What if they need us? Do you really believe they would help us?" I yelled, dragging her further into the tangled mass of trees. "We need to escape." Fear gripped my throat, squeezing around every rational thought as the presence of the shadows grew heavier with each step we took. And just as the branches seemed to thin out ahead, I caught sight of something flickering in the distance, a glowing light, pulsating softly like a heartbeat. A gasp of hope surged through me, and I turned toward it, desperation fueling my movement. "It's there!" I urged, pulling her along with renewed fervor. "We can get to it!" But the shadows growled, twisting and writhing in response, a deep rumble vibrating through the ground. "You will not leave," they growled, a sinister harmony that struck fear into my heart as we dashed forward. We pressed toward the light, and with every step, I could feel the shadowy claws groping at our heels, trying to drag us back into the dark embrace of despair. The pulsing glow grew stronger, illuminating our path as we raced toward it, the promise of escape shining brightly against the encroaching darkness. "Just a little further!" I shouted, praying that the light would protect us, would shield us from the hunger that surrounded us. And as we neared the light, everything shifted again, the trees bending and creeping as if to block our escape. The chorus of shadows thickened, their whispers crescendoing into a frenzied howl, rushing to engulf us in darkness once more. "Keep going," I yelled, pushing us toward the mesmerizing glow that felt closer than ever. the warmth inviting and safe. Yet, with every inch we gained, the shadows tugged harder, calling out with voices sharp and frayed, seeking to undermine our resolve. My heart thundered in my chest, pounding louder than the cacophony around us. "We are not afraid," I yelled, the words propelled by desperation, willing them to carry me toward that light with the strength of belief. Just as I gathered every ounce of strength to propel us forward, something unexpected happened. The light wavered as tendrils of darkness lashed out, ensnaring the air around us, stretching out like gnarled fingers seeking to pull us back into the void. A cold rush of panic coursed through me as I realized the light was not a beacon of salvation, but a lure crafted by the shadows themselves, designed to keep us spinning in confusion. "Don't give in," I screamed, pushing against the weight of the despair that sought to anchor me in place. The girl's face twisted in fear, her eyes darting wildly as she grasped my hand tighter, as if our connection was the only thing tethering us to reality. But the shadows writhed, and their icy whispers slithered into my mind, trying to drown out my determination. "Join us," they hissed, seductive in their deceit. "You won't escape. You're forever one of us." The words sliced through me like a razor, and as my resolve flickered, I stumbled. The brightness around us dimmed further, casting long, dark shapes that danced mockingly at the edges of my vision. The girl jerked me back, urgency flooding her voice. "We must go. Now!" Before I could react, the ground beneath us trembled violently, sending shards of earth and roots spiraling upward, creating a barrier that pushed us apart. The familiar chill of the forest enveloped me again. Its oppressive weight felt like a shroud, closing in on my every breath. I reached for her, desperation clawing at my throat as I shouted her name, but my voice was swallowed by a cacophony of laughter echoing through the trees. "Fools!" the shadows sang, their tones dripping with mockery. "You thought you could escape?" Before I could process what was happening, a dark mass formed beside me, a grotesque creature molded from the very essence of despair. It had no true shape, just a swirl of broken faces and twisted limbs that shimmered in the dying light. Its eyes glowed with a hunger that sent chills racing up my spine, gazing at me like I was the tastiest morsel it had ever encountered. "Help me," it rasped, its voice a sickening blend of longing and malice. The repetitive chant of lost souls echoed in my mind, almost drowning out the words I willed myself to say. "No," I forced through clenched teeth, edging away. "You're not real." Yet as I stumbled backward, the creature reached for me, its fingers elongating into shadowy claws, brushing my skin and sending icy shivers coursing through my veins. Its breath swirled around me, a vile mix of rot and decay. Drawing strength from my own fear, I turned and ran, slicing through the darkness. The laughter rang out again, sharper, filled with delight, as if they were enjoying my struggle. "Run, little one," the shadows taunted. "You can't run from your truth." Each step felt like wading through sludge as I pressed forward, desperate to find the girl. I had to keep moving. I had to find a path that led us away from this twisted nightmare. But as I raced through the murky shadows, the whispers morphed into shrieks, their heightening crescendo ringing in my ears like a warning bell, a harsh reminder that I was not alone. I dashed past gnarled roots and grabbed at stray branches as the sharp edges clawed at my skin. My heart raced, fueled by the adrenaline coursing through me as the darkness stretched out, eager to envelop me in its suffocating embrace. I could hear the rustling all around, as if the shadows themselves were alive, scheming and plotting to reclaim me. Then, just as despair began to wrap around me once more, a flicker of movement caught my eye. The girl! There she stood, silhouetted against another burst of shimmering light at what seemed to be an exit up ahead. Hope surged through my body, and I sprinted toward her, willing my limbs to move faster despite the weight pressing down on me. "Quick, this way!" she yelled, her own voice tinged with urgency that seemed to pierce through the encroaching cacophony. I could see her silhouette growing clearer as I broke free from the oppressive shadows wrapping around my legs. Relief flooded through me as I reached out, our hands clasping tightly. But even in our moment of connection, the shadows lunged at us from all sides, a swirling vortex of darkness trying to tear us apart. I could feel the pull of the void trying to claim us, dragging me back into desperation. "No!" I shouted, my resolve hardening. I didn't come this far to surrender now. I took a deep breath, drawing on that flickering light inside of me, a thread of hope that whispered of freedom. I locked eyes with the girl, and in our shared gaze, I saw the same fire reflected back, an unyielding spirit refusing to be snuffed out. "On three, we run," I called, adrenaline sharpening my focus as I counted down, blood roaring in my ears. 1, 2, 3. With all our strength, we burst forward, the light ahead dancing invitingly, a beacon of the salvation we so desperately sought. We ran, hearts pounding, the shadows shrieking behind us, their cries twisting into a haunting melody of despair. Just as we reached the glowing barrier, a wave of darkness crashed down, trying to slam us into the ground. I braced myself, but instead of collapsing into the overwhelming void, I felt a surge of energy pounding through me. We collided with the light, a warmth enveloping us like a protective cocoon, driving back the gnashing shadows that clawed at our backs. For a fleeting moment, we were free from the cries, the shadows retreating in horror from the brilliance. But just as quickly as the sound evaporated, the piercing laughter returned, mocking us from the fringes. "You think you're free?" It echoed, the shadows writhing in agitation. "You will always belong to us. You will always be drawn back." The brightness flickered momentarily, and inside that fragile moment of illumination, I glimpsed the shadows coiling and twisting around my memories, weaving them into something monstrous. Each vivid moment of dread, every flicker of my darkest fears, wrapped together, echoing the truth that I couldn't escape the past. "Something is waiting for us," the girl murmured, her voice trembling as the shadows writhed around us, pulsing with dark life, eager to ensnare us once more. I could feel that same dread rising in my chest. It was an undercurrent of inevitability, like a river dragging me back to its heart. "Stay close," I urged, even though an ache of weariness weighed down my limbs. As we stepped forward into the unforgiving light, I could hear the shadows whispering, tempting promises laced with threats. I could almost see their shadows flickering at the edges of my sight, crafting more figures, always watching, always waiting for their chance to pull us back into despair. But I refused to give in. Instead, I took the girl's hand again as we forged into the luminous path that glimmered before us. "There must be a way out of this," I declared, trying to dispel the dread curling around my mind. "There has to be an end to this nightmare." With every step closer to the light, I could feel the presence of the darkness receding, but its sinister chorus remained, the laughter lingering behind me, teasing the edges of my subconscious. Just as I thought we might be free, a shadow shot toward us, a tangible form erupting from the walls of light. This one was larger, more pronounced, its individual characteristics more defined. In a horrific instant, its outline took shape, revealing the gnarled visage of a mangled creature caught in perpetual torment. Its body was a patchwork of chains and ethereal tendrils, each tethering it to the shadows that pulsed nearby. "Flee now," it rasped, voice warped and distorted. "Before it's too late. They're coming for you both." The warning struck me like a physical blow, freezing me in place. Who was it? A fellow victim or a harbinger of doom? My instincts screamed for us to run, but something weighed heavily at the back of my mind, an unsettling truth trying to surface through the chaos. The shadows flickered as the figure reached out with an emaciated arm, pointing toward a dark path barely visible behind the splintered trees. "Go! You may escape, but not without a cost." I exchanged a glance with the girl, uncertainty catching in my throat. Could we trust this creature, or was it yet another trap? "What cost?" I shouted, voice trembling. "Your freedom comes with a price of darkness. To face what you fear the most, to confront your very selves." You cannot run forever." With those final words, a hiss of laughter erupted from behind, and I felt my resolve teetering. The shadows swirled closer, the hollow calls echoing louder. Glancing at the girl, I realized we had no choice. "We'll figure it out together," I reassured her, though doubt clawed at my chest. "We have to trust ourselves." And with steely determination, we turned toward the darkness behind the trees, daring to step into the unknown that awaited us, the shadows forming around us like a shroud, pulling us deeper into their unforgiving grasp. As we ventured into that twisted path, I felt every ounce of my heart racing, fueled by a mixture of dread and defiance. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I sensed that finding the truth would be our only chance at liberation. And, together, we would face whatever horrors awaited in the depths of our fears. As we stepped into the darkness, a chilling silence enveloped us, thicker than before. The faint glow we had followed faded away, leaving only shadows swirling in the corners of my vision. I could feel an oppressive weight in the air, each breath becoming harder to take. I looked back at the girl, desperate to gauge her expression, but even her silhouette was swallowed up in the dark. It felt like we had crossed an unseen threshold, leaving behind safety for the unknown horrors that lay ahead. "Stay close," I whispered, my voice barely a murmur, fearing that even the sound could draw unwanted attention. I squeezed her hand tighter, relying on that small semblance of connection to ground myself amidst the unsettling silence cloaking us. As we moved deeper, the forest transformed. Trees contorted into grotesque shapes, their stark branches resembling clawed hands reaching toward the sky, begging for escape from the nightmare around us. I could hear distant rustling noises, like dry leaves stirred by an unseen force, growing louder with each step we took. My heart pounded against my chest, a frantic drumbeat counting down to something unstoppable. Shadows danced at the edges of my vision, and just when I thought I saw a form darting through the underbrush, it vanished, leaving only a disquieting chill in its wake. "Did you see that?" I asked, turning to the girl, but she looked more pale than ever, her eyes wide with unshed tears. "We have to keep moving," I urged, not wanting to show my own fear. Something lurked just beyond the darkness, a presence that felt both alive and hungry, waiting for us to falter. Then, without warning, a chilling laugh echoed through the trees, cold and disembodied. It resonated in the pit of my stomach, twisting my insides into knots. The shadows seemed to pulse with life, and the air thickened, almost suffocating. "You cannot hide from what you are," the voice drawled, mocking and sinister. The ghastly sound seemed to wrap around us like a serpent, tightening with every moment. I forced myself to walk faster, dragging the girl along as panic clawed at my mind. "Ignore it," I said firmly, trying to instill courage into my voice. Each heartbeat resonated louder, a reminder that we were trapped, that something wanted us to lose our minds to sheer terror. But just as I thought we might escape the clutches of dread, the trees twisted again, and the ground buckled beneath our feet. Suddenly, the path split into two. One side was darker, the other slightly illuminated by an eerie, pale glow. "Which way?" the girl stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the raw fear emanating from her, and it matched my own. "Let's try the light," I said, though I felt a cold dread knotting in my stomach. Instinctively, I chose the unclear, safer route, the inviting glow that beckoned me. As we carefully stepped into its warmth, a soft humming filled the air. It resonated through me, vibrating with an otherworldly energy that was oddly comforting, yet deeply unsettling. Suddenly, out of the light emerged faceless figures, their bodies cloaked in shrouds of mist. They moved like wraiths, floating inches above the ground, their hands reaching out as if beckoning us. "Stay," they whispered, the sound reverberating, echoing in a heart-stopping chorus. "Stay forever with us." A chill of horror threatened to consume me. These were not people. They were specters, bound to this place by anguish and despair. Seeing their empty faces drained the last fragments of warmth from my bones. I wanted to run, but I was paralyzed by the intensity of their gaze. "Don't!" I shouted suddenly, pulling the girl away from their grasp, something unrelenting inside me unwilling to surrender to their call. We turned back, but the dark path loomed beside us, darker than before, with a stronger presence of dread. Shadows danced viciously at its edges, eager to reclaim us and drag us into darker depths. But escape was not in our favor. The light began to flicker and dim while their whispers intensified, dark life slithering back into the air, ghostly hands reaching for us with desperate need. "We only want to help you," a voice whispered, scratchy and unnatural, twisting the truth into something grotesque. "No!" I shouted, desperation driving me back toward the swirling shadows. I could feel the rush of panic swallowing every corner of my mind, urging me to flee. But the moment we took a step back, I felt it, a cold grip wrapping tightly around my ankle, pulling me down into the earth, jagged roots tightening around me like unforgiving shackles. "Help!" I gasped, staring into the girl's terrified eyes as I sank further. She lunged forward, trying to pull me free, but her fingertips grazed my skin, fading with every desperate attempt. The shadows coiled around my legs like vipers, gnawing at the edges of my senses. "Why do you fight?" the whispers taunted, wrapping my mind in a cocoon of despair. "You belong to us?" Images flooded my mind, memories twisting into nightmares. The glimpses of my past failures and regrets swirling in a storm of anguish, trying to pull me deeper into darkness. I felt the shadows tugging at me, urging me to give in, to succumb to the inevitability of despair. How could I fight when everything I held was being stripped away piece by piece? In a sudden surge of adrenaline, I grasped at the roots around me, refusing to let them claim me. "We can't give in," I gasped, my voice hoarse as I reached out for the girl. "Please help me." With a final, desperate cry, she yanked me upward, pulling with every ounce of her strength as I clawed my way back to the surface. "No, you must not leave," a chorus of voices howled, rising like a wave crashing against the rocks, filled with rage and desperation. Somehow, we broke free from the shadow's grasp, tumbling backward into the last vestiges of that pale glow. We lay panting on the ground, terror coursing through every bit of our being. The darkness clawed at the edges of the light, but we clung to each other, heartbeats steadying as we stole our breaths. "Did you see that?" the girl murmured, her voice a tremor. I nodded, still stunned by what had just transpired. But even as we lay in silence, shadows crept closer, teasing with uncertain flickers. The air thickened again, an unsettling presence lurking behind us, more monstrous than the last. That same laughter returned, and I realized we had not escaped at all. The shadows ceased to cower in the light. They twisted and turned as if re-establishing their claim. The wraiths began to murmur, their voices swarming us again. They drew closer, encircling us, their hollow eyes unblinking and filled with an insatiable hunger. "You can never escape your fate," they chanted, the words swirling around us like the echoes of a funeral dirge. I grabbed the girl's hand, readiness flooding through me. "Whatever happens, we face it together," I said firmly, trying to ignite a spark of courage through the suffocating fear. With that, we stood, facing the ominous weight of darkness. The shadows surged forward, the chilling mist curling toward us, hot and cold at the same time, chaotic and consuming as they enveloped us once more. "Let it be your final breath," one shadow whispered into my ear, just as we stepped forward, courage battling against a tide of despair. The darkness roared around us, and I knew that whatever had been unleashed could no longer be contained. But I also understood something vital. Running away wouldn't save us. We needed to confront this nightmare, to slip through that veil between fear and acceptance, where all that was lost might be reclaimed, or all that remained would vanish forever. Each breath drew me deeper into the chilling embrace of the impending abyss, and the only way to fight back was by confronting what it truly meant to confront oneself. I clutched the girl tighter, and as shadows surged to envelop us, we plunged into the heart of darkness together, prepared to face whatever. Horrors awaited us, the boundaries of despair fading into a bold abyss that promised both terror and revelation. The darkness engulfed us, a thick blanket of fear wrapping around our bodies, squeezing out hope. Every step we took felt more like a surrender, the cool earth beneath my feet transforming into a slimy substance that clung to my skin, pulling me toward the abyss with each hesitant stride. My heart raced wildly, echoing in my ears, raging against the chilling atmosphere that threatened to swallow me whole. As we moved deeper into this netherworld, the shadows shifted and pulsed, as if alive and eager to consume us. I could feel sharp tendrils reaching from the blackness, grazing my arms like unfriendly whispers. Each touch brought an electric jolt of terror, as if the shadows thrived on our fear, feeding off of the essence of our despair. I turned to the girl beside me, her face a mask of horror, lips trembling in the dim light. It was a grim reminder that we were not just fighting for our lives, but battling against something sinister that sought to claim our very souls. The air shifted suddenly, and an icy wind rushed past us, filling my lungs with a suffocating chill. Shadows flickered around me, creating grotesque shapes on the ground, twisting and turning as if they were mocking our plight. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, straining to catch a sound that sent shivers through my bones. The girl nodded, her eyes wide as she pressed closer, seeking comfort and strength in our shared terror. From the depths of the void came a low humming, a haunting melody that echoed with forgotten sorrow. It resonated through the air, chilling me to my core. I recognized it as a lullaby, bittersweet and sorrowful, weaving through the darkness like a snake in the grass. Dread coiled around me tighter, the rhythm reminding me of something I couldn't quite place. Something from long ago, a past that I had tried to bury deep. I had to shake it off. We couldn't linger here, couldn't let whatever lay hidden in the shadows take root in our minds. Then, in the distance, glowing eyes appeared, piercing the darkness like beacons of malice. They shifted closer, blinking deliberately, revealing monstrous forms emerging from the despair. Each creature was a twisted reflection of our fears, bodies contorted in grotesque ways, limbs elongated and crooked. Some had mouths that opened far too wide, filled with jagged teeth that seemed to belong to nightmares. The scent of decay hung in the air, an oppressive reminder of death and despair as they grew nearer. "They hunger," one of the creatures rasped, its voice like the crackling of old leaves, sending ice through my veins. "They crave what you dare to hide." I felt the clutch of panic tighten within my chest. Those words struck a chord deep inside me, unveiling long-buried secrets that clawed at my sanity. I pulled the girl closer, shielding her from the horrific sights closing in around us. My instincts screamed for us to run, to escape this dreadful place. Yet my feet remained rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. From among the horde, a figure stepped forward, cloaked in shadows, its face obscured yet somehow familiar. "You think you can just leave?" it taunted, the voice twisting in the air like smoke. "You must confront what you fear. Only then can you escape." With that, the creature reached out a hand, shadows swirling around its fingers, beckoning me forward. A sick, twisted part of me felt drawn to it, a strange temptation mixed with horror. I had to resist. I knew this was a trap. As if sensing my hesitation, the figure smiled, a disturbingly wide grin that sent cold waves of dread crashing over me. "No more running," it hissed, stepping closer, eyes blazing with a cruel light. "We are all waiting for you, deep within. You can't escape what you've done." The memories flooded back in a rush, a tidal wave of regret and remorse that threatened to drown me. I saw faces, lost moments, choices that haunted me, pain woven into the fabric of my existence. I gripped the girl's hand tighter, trying to hold on to reality, to remind myself that I wasn't alone in this. Focus on me, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady despite the terror clawing at my throat. We can get through this. We have to face whatever they're showing us together. Just as I spoke, the ground beneath us shook violently, a deep rumble that reverberated through my bones. The shadows split open, revealing a dark pit that seemed to pulse with an insatiable hunger. No, this wasn't natural. It felt like a gaping maw waiting to swallow us whole. Join us, they howled, a cacophony of voices filling the air, twisting together in a dreadful song of suffering and despair. The girl backed away, terror painted across her features. "Don't!" I shouted, drawing her back toward me, refusing to let the pull of that monstrous void take her. Whatever this is, we can face it. We can find a way out. But the shadows were relentless, seeping closer and wrapping around our ankles, tightening their grip with every step we took. Panic rose within me as I fought to keep the overwhelming fear at bay. I needed to keep us moving, to keep us alive. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the air, a raw echo that resonated deep within me. "Help me," it cried, dripping with anguish. The sound was familiar, and it sent a shockwave of recognition through my body, as if I had heard it before. The scream tore through the shadows, momentarily illuminating the twisted forms frozen around us. The girl's eyes widened in realization, fear twisting the features of her face. It's my brother," she gasped, stumbling back. I felt her hand slip from mine, and in that moment, terror surged through me. "No!" I cried, reaching for her, but the shadows quickly closed the gap, wrapping around her form, pulling her into the darkness that gnawed hungrily at our bond. "Face your truth," the race mocked, their eyes glowing ominously. "Seal your fate. There's nowhere left to run." The girl's terrified screams pierced through the chaos, echoing in my mind as I lunged forward, determined to break the boundary between us. But something pulled me back, a weight tethering me to the spot, shadows encircling me like chains. I was held captive between two horrendous realities, the girl slipping from my grasp and the unveiling shadows that threatened to devour her. "Choose," the voice crooned, low and menacing. "Choose to stay, or choose to save her." As the shadows coiled around my heart, I could feel the breaking point approach, a split second where I could still make a choice, powerful and consuming. But the cost? What would it take for me to save her? With a deep breath, I forced the memories back, banishing the pain long enough to focus on what really mattered. Her light, her strength, the hope that we could still escape this nightmare together. Surging forward with newfound determination, I tore through the grasp of the shadows, pushing against the cold, clammy fingers that clung to me. I saw the girl, still fighting against the grasp of despair, tears streaming down her face as she reached back toward me. "Fight!" I shouted, my voice transformed into something fierce and primal. "Don't let them take you." With that command, I felt a spark ignite within me, a flicker of defiance that propelled me forward. I reached for her, catching her hand just as the shadows roared in anger, thrashing wildly as they tried to pull us apart. In that moment, a brilliant light erupted from our joined hands, illuminating the dark realm around us, pushing the shadows back. Their howls turned into whispers, and I could feel the heavy weight of despair lift as we pulled together against the encroaching void. "Together," I bellowed, "we can break free." The light expanded, burning away the mists, revealing the grotesque faces of the shadows contorting in agony as they recoiled from our combined strength. The pit behind us cracked, fissures spreading like lightning, and with each pulse of light, the remnants of darkness crumbled beneath our feet. But just as we thought we had won, the voice returned, more furious than before. "You cannot escape the shadows of yourselves," it thundered, shaking the very ground. "You must confront them." I could feel the shadows encroaching once more, trying to drag us back into the vortex of our fears. But as the last tendrils of darkness began to stretch toward us, I steeled myself and turned to the girl. "We have to see it, face it together, and we can win." With a nod, Her resolve strengthened mine, and we turned toward the dark pit that threatened to consume us. "Show yourself!" I screamed, my voice mingling with the echoes of the abyss. Light surged from my being, illuminating the darkness like a beacon. "We are not afraid." The ground trembled, and the shadows writhed, revealing the hidden scars of my past. The moments of pain that had driven us here, the regrets I had locked away. I saw faces of those I had lost, the weight of their presence settling onto my shoulders, pressing down like an unbearable burden. The memories blurred, merging into one overwhelming vision. But this time, I wouldn't shy away. I would confront it all, face every shadow forged from regret and guilt. I held onto the girl beside me as we stepped forward into the swirling chaos. A determined fire ignited in my chest. Together, we shouted in unison, pushing past the darkness that threatened to break us. As the dying echoes of our cries filled the air, the shadows recoiled, blocking their captive with the light we conjured until time became suspended. Step by step, we fought. We would not let despair define us. We would rise up, reclaim what was lost, and leave the darkness behind for good. And as the shadows thrashed around us, I knew the moment was coming, a reckoning between fear and courage, where we would emerge either as victors or lost in the void, forever entwined with the darkness we had dared to confront. I felt the shadows swirling around us, writhing and tightening like a noose, eager to drag us into the depths. The darkness buzzed with sinister energy, its malevolent whispers filling the air, taunting me with my deepest fears. "You can't escape," they hissed, their voices an agonizing chorus that roared around me like a storm. "Embrace it. It's too late for you." I could sense the girl trembling beside me, and my heart ached for her. We were trapped in this nightmare, the oppressive weight of despair threatening to crush us under its dark embrace. But I couldn't let fear paralyze me now. Taking a shaky breath, I tightened my grip on her hand, pouring every ounce of my strength into that connection. "We're not done yet," I declared, trying to sound braver than I felt. Then we stepped forward together, the light pulsating and brightening as we moved, pushing against the invading darkness. Each step was a struggle against the invisible chains trying to pull us back, fear clawing at my sanity. The shadows shrieked, a deafening wail that reverberated through the very fabric of this nightmarish place. But we forced ourselves onward. Suddenly, an icy chill swept over me, and I paused, feeling a shift in the air. A thick fog rolled in, wrapping around our legs and exposing bits of dread I thought I'd tucked away. From the obscuring mist, a sinister figure materialized, tall and slender, draped in ragged cloaks that fluttered like dead leaves in the wind. The creature leaned forward, its face obscured in shadow, only its piercing eyes visible, glowing like coals in a dying fire. "You thought you could defy us?" it crooned, voice smooth yet laced with malice. "You think this is just a test?" Panic surged again as it stepped closer, the darkness crackling around its form. "You belong to us," it whispered, each word cutting through the dim light. As I stared into its eyes, I felt a pull, a sickening familiarity that made my stomach churn. "Look closer," it urged, and I knew without wanting to that it was beckoning me to uncover my darkest truth. "No!" I shouted, feeling my resolve begin to falter. I squeezed the girl's hand harder, determined not to be swayed. "We're not going to give in." With a roar, I charged forward, driven by the primal instinct to protect her from that dreadful creature. As if sensing my resolve, the shadows erupted in a vengeful storm, surging forward, wrapping around me like icy tendrils. I staggered back, caught off guard by their strength, but I wouldn't let them consume me. "Keep going," I urged the girl, anger and fear mixing into a volatile strength. I needed to show her that we were stronger than this nightmare. The fog hissed, the creatures chattering in a blasphemous way as they tried to break through the walls of light we had summoned. I lifted my chin defiantly, refusing to show any sign of weakness. "We can fight this together." Suddenly, a burst of light flared from my chest, igniting the shadows surrounding us. The energy crackled and surged, pushing back against the encroaching doom. I felt my heart quicken as figures reflected in the mist began to swirl. Twisted images of moments I wished to forget. Faces of strangers, shadows from my childhood, all mingled together in a chaotic dance of horror. Each face bore silent accusations, judging me as their haunting figures collided in the fog. "You left us," they cried, their voices merging into a cacophony that made my skin crawl. "You abandoned us." I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to focus on the girl standing beside me, her terrified eyes locked onto mine. "Stay with me," I shouted, rallying our shared strength against this onslaught of guilt and regret. "These are lies. We will break free." The shadows began to swirl faster, their screams penetrating the air like a relentless storm. The fog thickened, trying to drown out my voice as the figures clawed at the edges of my mind, wrestling for control. I could feel the memories welling up, bitter and sharp, desperate to overpower me with their weight, but I embraced my anger. I won't let them win. With a surge of determination, I plunged forward into the heart of the maelstrom, leading the girl into the thickening dark, her footsteps steady behind me. I could feel the shadows clawing at my back, trying to pull me down into the pit of despair. But each step drew me closer to the truth hidden beneath the layers of fear. Then, as if sensing the shift in my focus, the shadows recoiled, forming into shapes that twisted and morphed into grotesque forms, each more terrifying than the last. Faces I recognized emerged and burst forth from the darkness, twisted, angry, and filled with despair. "Why did you turn your back?" one of the figures bellowed, and I realized it was my best friend, lost to the abyss of my past. Her eyes burned with both sorrow and rage, a reflection of my deepest regrets. "You abandoned me. I tried to save you," I screamed back, the pain flooding back like a tidal wave. "But I couldn't. I thought I was doing what was right." The darkness seemed to pulse, sensing the crack in my resolve. The shadows around me began to close in again, hungry for my despair. I could feel the weight of the past drag, ing me down, each regret pulling me into the depths of despair. But I couldn't let it consume me. "Think of the light," I shouted, fighting back against the suffocating gloom. The girl's presence beside me sparked something powerful. We were not just facing my shadows, but our combined energies providing the strength to push through. "Remember why we fight," I urged her, echoing my words back to me. "For those who've fallen, for those we love, they deserve our fight." A new fire ignited within me, swirling with the memories of love and laughter that had brought joy amidst the darkness. I could envision her brother's laugh, bright and unyielding against the shadows. And suddenly, they weren't alone. Countless others joined the melody in my mind, resurrecting echoes of life and happiness everlasting. Together, we surged forward into the crushing darkness, our voices joining in one harmonious chant that shook the very foundation of this nightmare. "We are more than our fears. We are more than our regrets." As we pressed against the dark figures closing in, the brightness from our combined energy swelled, illuminating the shadows that shrunk back, shrieking in agony as they were banished from our presence. The darkness quivered and cracked, surrendering to our will, breaking under the sheer force of our renewed hope as we tore through. Closer we were to that unseen horizon, radiant and unfathomable. But even as we surged ahead, I felt a cold grip on my ankle, ice slithering up my leg, holding tightly while attempting to drag me back into that abyss of nightmares. I glanced down to find a twisted hand emerging from the ground, fingers elongated and skeletal, dragging me toward the pit of my own making. "No!" I screamed, fighting against the frigid grasp with everything I had. I threw my other arm back, reaching out for the girl. "Don't let go!" The shadows moaned in disappointment as I desperately yanked my foot free. But the hands gripped tighter, twisting my ankle cruelly, pulling me closer to the ground as it cracked beneath me. Shrieks echoed around me, and the air vibrated with electricity. I looked into the faces of my fears, the memories I had wished to escape. Their glee at my impending downfall echoed loudly. But the girl wouldn't let go. "Hold on," she shouted, determination sparking in her voice. She braced herself, digging her heels into the ground, pulling against the shadows that snarled around us. Suddenly, in a moment of raw desperation, I pulled my strength together and let out a primal roar. "Get away from us!" A blinding light erupted from my hands, washing over the shadows clung to me, exploding into fragments as I pulled with all my might, ripping myself free from their grasp. The creature below began to disintegrate into swirling embers, howling as it faded into nothingness. Exhausted but relentless, we charged through the remnants of darkness, pushing ourselves past the veil of despair, a new light illuminating the path ahead. Our combined strength pulsed through the air like the thumping of a war drum, driving us closer to safety. But just as I thought we were free, I heard a chilling whisper rise above the cacophony surrounding us. "You think you can escape your reckoning?" It slithered through the air like venomous smoke. "You belong to us?" The shadows surged again, and a wave of darkness crashed around us, threatening to swallow us whole. Fear gripped my heart as I felt the edges of reality begin to unravel. I held onto the girl tightly, feeling her heartbeat match mine, steady and resolute. "We have to center ourselves," I urged, squaring my shoulders in defiance. When they come at us again, we push back harder. With an overwhelming surge of adrenaline, we screamed into the dark, a collective battle cry against our fears, against the shadows that tried to shackle us to a past we refused to accept. As the darkness crashed forward, the light between us flickered brighter than ever, an intense blaze casting out the gloom, threatening to engulf everything. The shadows shrieked, their attempts to consume us becoming frantic. I could feel myself slipping, the burden of fear wrapped tightly around my heart, but I roared into the dark. "Get out of here, you manifest of fears!" And with that final push, something shifted. A crack appeared, fissuring through the darkness as it began to shatter around us, exploding like glass under pressure, releasing a cascading burst of light, illuminating everything, driving every shadowing creature back into the void. We were on the edge of something monumental. This was the precipice, whether we would be consumed or break through, finally leaving the dread behind. I could almost taste freedom as the darkness retreated, swallowed by the light that surged around us. And just when it seemed we might be able to escape, a shadow swirled in front of us, blocking our path to freedom. It was immense, far larger than anything we had seen so far, its face more grotesque and twisted than any before. In one swift motion, it lunged, an icy claw reaching out while letting out a horrible howl that shook the very ground beneath us. We only had moments to react. My heart raced. Were we too late? But deep inside, I felt the flicker of something still alive, urging me forward. This was our moment. This was not the end. It was just the beginning. Together, we rolled forward, into the abyss of shadows one last time, prepared to break the madness and reclaim the light, even as the dark beast screeched in fury and the ground fractured beneath our feet. Indeed, we would not be devoured without a fight. I could feel the darkness coiling around us, and in that moment, the weight of dread crashed back down like a tide, pulling me under. My heart hammered in my chest as I faced the massive shadow, the creature's eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger. It opened its maw, a dark abyss that seemed to swallow the very light around us. The air turned thick and heavy, laced with a sickening odor that sent my stomach churning. "Run!" I screamed to the girl, my voice swallowed by the creature's horrible growl that echoed like thunder. But there was nowhere to go. The ground beneath us heaved, fissures opening up like hungry jaws ready to snap at our feet. The shadows pressed in, eager to consume us, and I felt the chill of despair reach into my bones. This was the moment when fear and hopelessness could swallow me whole. As the creature lunged, its jagged teeth glinting in the dim light, I grabbed the girl and twisted to the side, narrowly avoiding the snapping jaws. We stumbled and fell, rolling across the rough ground, the gravel biting into our skin. The roar of the beast deafened me, reverberating through my very soul, filling the air with a cacophony of anguish and rage. I could hear the whispers growing louder, a dark chorus chanting my failures, my weaknesses. "Look at what you've unleashed," they cried, their voices intermingling with the howl of the creature. "You cannot escape your own making." I forced myself to rise, dragging the girl with me, her eyes wide with fear, mirroring my own terror. The shadows danced around us, laughing with twisted glee, feeding off our despair. I felt my lungs tighten, the weight of panic closing in. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to surrender to the darkness that promised an end to this torment. But deep down, I knew surrendering meant losing her as well. Together, we retreated, backing away from the precipice of our terror, stumbling over unseen roots and stones. I could feel the ground tremble beneath us, shifting like a tempest ready to SWA. Lo us whole. It was alive with shadows, and I had become their prey. "Stay close," I shouted, my voice a desperate plea. "We can do this." As the beast roared again, its voice crashing over us like a wave, I saw it shift, a ripple of darkness sliding along the ground toward us. It was searching, hunting, ready to pounce. I grasped the girl's hand tighter, urging her forward. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, but I knew we were too close to turning back now. Suddenly, from the shadows, more figures began to emerge, swirling around us like smoke. Their forms blurred and twisted, resembling faces of people I once knew. They held arms extended, each one a mirror of regret and pain, grasping for me as if wanting to remind me of every choice I had ever made. The whispers rose to a frenzied pitch, and I felt their cold fingers brushing against my skin, clawing at my resolve. "Leave it behind," they hissed. "You can join us. In the suffering, I won't," I roared, my voice ringing against the silence that momentarily followed. I refused to fall for their deceit. "I will not join you." But the shadows persisted, weaving their deception with relentless determination. Each face that loomed forward carried shadows of sorrow, lost friends, family members, and forgotten memories. The sight struck a chilling chord within me, igniting feelings of guilt and desolation. I had failed them, and now they returned to drag me down. With each step, the fear thickened like a fog, clawing at my mind. I could feel the girl beside me slip, her grip faltering as she gasped for air. I can't do this," she cried, her voice wavering on the edge of despair. "We're going to die here." "No," I shouted, forcing myself to turn and face her. "We will not die here. We've come too far." I took a deep breath, trying to summon the strength I could still feel flickering within me. "Remember why we fight. Think of your brother." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, a brief, flickering moment, the fear melted away. "You're right," she nodded, determination igniting in her gaze. "We can't let them win." Together we took a step, then another, moving deeper into the shadows that pressed around us like a vice. I summoned every ounce of hope I could cling to. It was time to face them, to confront the darkness directly. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the cacophony of despair. "You have no power over us." The shadows paused, a moment of silence that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. I could feel the beast retreat momentarily, its claws scraping along the ground as it turned its attention to my defiance. This was the moment, the flicker of light in a consuming dark. I stepped closer to the swirling mass of shadowy figures, yelling into the abyss, drawing strength from the love I still carried, the memories I would never abandon. "Every wound you inflict only makes us stronger," I declared, my voice unwavering. "We embrace our pain, and we transform it." The darkness recoiled, and the figures began to fade, their grasp loosening as light enveloped us, a beacon in the oppressive gloom. I could feel the shadows wailing in frustration, their cries morphing into something more menacing. They swirled, twisting and reforming into the grotesque shapes of my darkest nightmares, laughing with hollow voices that made my skin crawl. "Join us, or perish in silence," the creature hissed, its voice slithering along my spine, chilling me to the bone. I squared my shoulders, feeling that fire rekindle within me. "We are not your puppets," I yelled, drawing all my strength into those words, willing the light around us to ignite brighter. With each syllable, I felt the power of our unity grow, my heart beating in time with the girls, creating a pulse of strength against the encroaching darkness. Together we pushed against the shadows, refusing to falter in the face of despair. Then in the eye of the storm, something shifted. The ground trembled once more, but this time a fissure opened up, a crack in the dark fabric that bound the monster and us. Light seeped through, and I could feel warmth radiating from it, a promise of escape. "Go!" I shouted, urgency flickering in my voice. "We have to jump." The girl nodded, her eyes filled with fear, but also determination. We sprinted toward the opening, the darkness howling behind us, shrieking in anger and desperation. The shadows lunged, clawing at our heels, but I could feel the light resonating within me, pushing us closer to our escape. Every step felt electric, the battlefield between light and dark igniting beneath our feet. As we leaped into the light, the world blurred around us. I felt the pull of the shadows behind us, clawing desperately to drag us back into the depths, but I held onto the warmth of hope, locked my eyes on the brilliant glimmer growing brighter ahead. The moment we crossed the threshold, time fractured. The past, the pain, the shadows, all collapsed in on themselves as if they were mere reflections in a dark mirror. I could hear the creature's roar fading into nothingness, its power dwindling as we were consumed by the light. Yet the shadows didn't give up so easily. A dark wave washed over us, and just as we thought we were freed, it enveloped us like chains. I felt my body freeze, fear creeping back in, trying to take hold. The world spun, and in an instant, I was standing in a desolate landscape, the air thick with lament and despair. It was a place I recognized all too well, my memories coiling around me like serpents, and I was back at the beginning of it all. Once again, the weight of every regret, every dark moment of my life loomed. Behind me, the girl stood frozen, her shadow stretching unnaturally, merging with the darkness around us. "No," I gasped, panic rising again. "Not this." The shadows closed in like a vice, voices swirling with venomous delight. "You can't escape what you are," they chanted, their sounds shifting between the many figures I once knew, everyone I had ever let down. I trembled, feeling the ground slip beneath my feet once more, but this time, a fierce anger ignited inside me. "No, I will not be defined by my mistakes," I screamed, determination flooding my heart. The ground began to shake violently, the shadows shrilling in rage. "You can't fight us? Join us," they wailed, a chorus of torment that roared with history and regret. In that moment, I realized what I had to do. I faced the dark abyss behind me, the shadows howling louder than ever, and raised my hands. "You don't own me," I shouted, channeling every ounce of strength, every feeling of love and loss. A brilliant light erupted from my core, pouring into the world around me, scattering the shadows like leaves caught in a storm. The darkness shrieked, its forms twitching and writhing, but I kept pushing against the tide, pushing against my own fears. "Go back," I cried, hoping beyond hope that the girl could hear me. "Find the light. We can break through." But as I turned, I caught sight of her face, twisted in agony, her form flickering like a flame in the wind, fading against the dark backdrop. "No!" I yelled, panic clawing at me, threatening to pull my focus away. "I'm not leaving you." I rushed forward but felt a violent pull dragging me back, shadows snaking around my limbs, pulling me toward the threshold between light and dark. I felt a violent pull dragging me back, shadows snaking around my limbs, pulling me toward the threshold between light and dark. My vision blurred as I struggled against the encroaching darkness, a chilling fear wrapping around my throat like a vice. I could hear her voice fading, swallowed by the chaotic maelstrom of despair that roared around us. "No, I won't leave you," I shouted, my heart thrumming in my chest as I was yanked backward while the shadows writhed and twisted, their whispers becoming a deafening cacophony. Memories of laughter and warmth flickered through my mind like a slideshow of unwelcome moments, taunting me with images of joy snatched away. Each face held a haunting familiarity: friends, family, the girl's brother, and their eyes glimmered with the expectation of my failure. It felt as if every regret, every moment I wished I could change, was flooding back and I could hardly breathe. Suddenly, from the darkness emerged the figure of my own past, a ghostly outline of the mistakes I had made, dangerous and formidable, radiating a suffocating aura of guilt that settled over me like an oppressive blanket. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, peering into my soul, chest rising and falling with a rhythm of despair that matched my own. "You think you're stronger than this?" it hissed, a cold smile spreading across its face, warped and twisted. Then the shadows broke apart and swirled around it, merging into a massive shape looming over me. This was the embodiment of my fears, an entity born from every choice I had regretted, every dream dashed against the rocks of reality. As it took form, I felt the ground tremble beneath me, the air thick with malevolence. The darkness pulsed, throbbing like a heartbeat, each boom resonating deep within my chest. "You belong to me," it whispered, its voice slithering through the air, swimming in and out of my wanting thoughts. "You can never escape." My breath caught in my throat as the shadows began to constrict tighter around me. "No!" I yelled, panic igniting a fire in my belly, summoning every shred of willpower. I pushed against the encroaching mass, my limbs straining against the weight of despair that threatened to consume me whole. "Your hope is hollow," it taunted, snapping its fingers like breaking glass. And suddenly I was surrounded by apparitions, figures shifting in the dark, spinning around with masks of sorrow stretched across their hollow faces. I recognized them, ghosts from my past, drifting close, forcing me to relive every painful memory. "Help us," a spectral voice called, echoing through the darkness. The cries intermingled like smoke, swirling around my head, wrapping around my brain like a vice. "You could have saved us. You let us down." I bit back a cry as their venomous words pierced my heart, dragging me into the depths of my regret. I turned to the girl, but she was lost in the chaos. The shadows thickened, swirling viciously, tugging her away like a tide pulling at a stranded ship. I lunged toward her, but the darkness howled like a furious wolf, snapping at my heels. "No! Get away from her!" I screamed, my voice almost lost to the shadows that clawed at me, desperately trying to suck me into the darkness. With every ounce of strength I had left, I thrust my hands forward, willing the light I still felt flickering inside of me to burst forth. To my surprise, a bright energy surged within me, illuminating the black void as if reaching toward the sky. The shadows hissed, shrieking in outrage at my defiance, but I was not giving in. I closed my eyes and concentrated, envisioning the warmth of the sun breaking through the clouds, the shimmering light that always felt just out of reach. "Together!" I cried, my voice trembling but resolute, pulling every memory of warmth and affection into the forefront of my mind. I envisioned the girl beside me, her smile bright, her laughter painting the corners of my mind with colors I thought were long gone. "We're stronger together!" The shadows wavered under the intensity of my resolve, howling in anguish and despair, their claws faltering as the light began to envelop them. I felt a rush of adrenaline as the dark figures stumbled back, shifting and morphing into chaotic shapes, but not quite dissolving. But just when I thought I had gained some ground, The towering shadow of my fears lunged forward, its terrible grin widening as it drew closer. Its voice reverberated through the air, deep and thunderous. "You can't escape your past. You will always be mine." I was paralyzed by the weight of its accusation, that terrible truth hanging in the air between us like a stone. But I understood something in that moment. I could use that truth to break free. It was a part of me, yes, but it didn't define my existence. I had made my mistakes, but I could fight and win against the darkest of my demons. "Maybe I can't change the past," I yelled, bolstered by a newfound power surging through my veins. "But I can choose who I want to be." With that declaration, I surged forward, pushing the light into the very core of the dark figure, forcing it back. It writhed and screamed, tremors shooting through the ground as I blazed brighter than before, illuminating the freezing void around me. The shadows recoiled as the light grew, pushing them away like waves retreating from the shore. The girl's voice broke through the fray. "I'm here. Don't let go of me." I turned, relief flooding through me as I saw her battling through the chaos, still fighting against the onslaught of darkness that tried to pull her back. Summoning every ounce of strength, I reached out, closing the gap between us. "Together, we can break through," I shouted, our fingers intertwined. The shadows shrieked, furious at our unity, and the massive entity surged forth, ready to crush us beneath its weight. With an anguished howl, it lunged for us as if to devour our resolve. But I could feel it within me, that pulsing energy, a tempest of light fueled by our determination and the memories of those we blamed, an undeniable force against the encroaching shadows. I closed my eyes, focusing on the warm glow encasing us, drawing upon it as the darkness roared, wrapping around our bodies like chains. "We are more than our fears," I cried out as the creature's jaws snapped mere inches from our faces. "We will not be broken." With a fierce scream of defiance, I pushed against the darkness, fueled by hope and the fierce bond between me and the girl. An explosion of light erupted before us, a brilliant beacon piercing through the shadowy veil. And in that radiant moment, I felt the pressure begin to falter. The shadows shrieked, their form twisting and writhing in an agonizing collapse, disintegrating into the air like smoke. The powerful entity behind us reeled back, its grasp loosening. "Run!" I shouted, urging the girl forward. "Now!" We sprinted toward the light pouring through the crack in the darkness, the glow drawing us in like a moth to the flame. But just as we were about to breach the threshold, the shadows reassembled themselves, surging forward with a vengeance that sent a wave of dread racing through me. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to push through the icy fear. Just when it looked like we might be consumed again, an overwhelming warmth spread from my heart through my limbs, igniting a firestorm of courage. Together we broke through, leaping into the blinding light that surrounded us. But as the dark shadows shrieked in their defeat, I felt a cold hand grasp my wrist, a last-ditch effort by the entity to pull me back into their grasp. "Don't let go. We're almost free," the girl cried, her eyes wide with fear. I felt a jolt of panic, the icy fingers latching onto my skin, dragging me toward darkness. "I won't," I shouted, refusing to surrender. I grasped her hand tighter, focusing on the warmth radiating between us, that unfading bond forged against the manifestations of our darkest thoughts. With a final push, I heaved forward, our combined light blinding everything behind us. The shadows whirled and twisted, their forms shrinking back as the radiant glow surged ahead. I felt the connection between us build, that undeniable pulse of strength coiling tightly around us like a lifeline. Together, we roared, voices intertwining in a unified battle cry against the dark entities that clawed desperately at our heels. The darkness screamed in horror as my last ounce of strength coursed through my fingers, surging toward the light that beckoned us, promising escape and hope. And then we were through. The light swallowed us whole. But as the darkness recoiled, I felt a presence linger, a sinister whisper echoing past my thoughts. You may escape tonight, but I will always be here. You cannot banish your darkness. I opened my eyes, gasping for breath, hope spilling into my mind like a cascade of stars. We had fought through the abyss, and despite their threats, we had won. But deep down, a chilling notion pulsed with a single question. How long before the darkness would return? The light enveloped us completely, bathing everything in a brilliance that felt both warm and comforting. I took a moment to catch my breath, the echoes of our struggle fading into the background, replaced by a serene stillness. But even as I breathed out a sigh of relief, a nagging unease coiled in my gut. I could feel it still, an oppressive weight, a reminder of the shadows that lingered just beyond my perception. Did we really escape? I asked, my voice thin and shaky. I turned to the girl beside me, desperately searching her expression for reassurance. But her face was pale, eyes wide, darting around us as if expecting the darkness to surge back at any moment. I don't know, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. It felt too easy, like it was a trick, and instinctively, I understood what she meant. The glow around us seemed to pulsate, flickering like a faulty bulb, creating strange dancing shadows on the ground that sent chills down my spine. The air thickened around us, suffocating and electric, while the silence felt like an uninvited guest looming over us, waiting for the moment to strike. Suddenly, a low, malevolent laugh echoed in the distance, rising up like a fog curling through the trees. It chilled our blood, and I felt my heart race. Did you hear that? I asked, panic rising anew. A pointed finger directed towards the shadows creeping along the edges of our light, moving closer like waves approaching the shore. The air grew tense, vibrating with an energy that felt distinctly wrong, like the calm before a storm. We need to go, I whispered urgently, but my legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot. Every instinct urged me to run, yet curiosity held me in place, urging me to peer into the depths of the encroaching void. Before I could wrestle with the impulse, shadows coiled back together, forming a grotesque figure that slid out of the darkness. It was a distorted reflection of myself, a nightmarish version that bore all my regrets like a shroud. Its smile was twisted, eyes glimmering with cruel delight as it stepped closer. I could see the pain etched on its face, the sorrow I tried to bury rising to the surface. It's no use running, it sneered, voice echoing off the walls of light surrounding us. You still carry me within you. What makes you think you can escape? I staggered back, feeling the weight of its words settle over me. This was the truth I feared. It crushed me, but somewhere within the depths of that agony, a glimmer of defiance sparked. I could choose to resist. I could confront this dark reflection. Leave us alone, I shouted, forcing my voice to rise against the tide of despair. You don't control me. The creature's laughter morphed into a cacophony of voices, every nightmare I had ever faced echoing in unison, each taunt pushing deeper into my mind. You are weak. You'll always return to us, like a moth to a flame. But I wouldn't give in. I focused on the girl beside me, her unwavering spirit igniting something within. Together, we were stronger than this mirage of darkness. Frantically, I squeezed her hand, and together we turned to face the monstrosity, refusing to be paralyzed by our fears any longer. With a surge of energy, we shouted, "We're not afraid." The creature screeched, a sound that vibrated through my bones, twisting with rage as the light around us began to pulse again in response, brighter than before. But this time I felt something shift. We were no longer retreating. We surged forward, hearts pounding in unison, a dynamic duo against the raw force of despair. And then, without warning, the landscape morphed. The ground beneath us trembled violently as the shadows twisted and writhed, revealing grotesque faces and clawed hands clawing up from below. They pulled at the very fabric of our reality, reaching for us with fingers sharp as knives. The piercing shrieks resonated through the air, creating an atmosphere thick with malice. Stay close, I shouted as we dashed toward the flickering light in the distance, a beacon amid the chaos. But the shadows persisted, thrashing around as if trying to drag us back down into the depths from which we had barely emerged. I felt a creeping sense of dread clawing at my thoughts, urging me to turn back, to submit. "It's not worth it," the darkness whispered, its voice now smooth, seducing me with promises of relief from the never-ending fear. "Just give in. Join us." I clenched my jaw, determined not to allow it to cloud my thoughts. "No," I retorted, my voice a fierce declaration against the haunting screams. "You will not take me again." As we neared the light, we saw it begin to flicker, the shadows closing in with relentless ferocity. The creature lunged at us, its maw wide and insatiable, and in the last moment before it struck, I felt an overwhelming surge of power rush through my core. "Together," I yelled as I grasped the girl's hand tightly, feeling our combined strength resonating like wildfire. With every ounce of energy, we dove into the heart of the brilliance, the intensity wrapping around us like a cocoon. I felt an explosion of warmth, the burgeoning light blinding everything behind us, making the creature screech in utter horror. And just as we crossed the threshold, I glanced back, where shadows clawed frantically at our retreating forms. But deep in their eyes, I saw something flicker. Was it fear? Recognition? They were unable to hold us as we ascended into the light, pulling the darkness away in a final desperate wave. The blinding brilliance enveloped me entirely. A moment of serenity swept through me, but within that peace lay a haunting echo, a whisper that resonated in the silence. "You can only run so long, you know. I'll always be here, waiting. Always," I gasped, the aftershocks reverberating through me even in my victory. What had I really escaped? Darkness kneaded my heart, lurking just beneath the surface, a constant reminder of the struggle etched into my very being. Freedom? Perhaps. But there was still the weight of my shadows, always waiting, a looming presence in the corners of my mind. I stepped forward into the light, together with the girl, resolve settling into my bones. While I could embrace the light, the darkness would always be a part of me. I would carry it, but it would not consume me. Together with her, we could face whatever lay ahead. And that thought, as unsettling as it was, felt like the first step into a new chapter, full of both light and shadows.